2, 1.
And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No, because I'm going to get
This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It's Thursday, May 9th, 2013. I'm Doug Hagmann. With me in studio is my son, my co-host, part of the Northeast Intelligence Network, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. I want to thank you for joining us for the next 3 hours. You're going to hear unbiased, uncensored news, information, and analysis of the news. News presented to you in 3D, where we look beyond the headlines, beyond the bylines, and bring you the news behind the news. Folks, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. I say that for the new people joining us, and I've received emails today from 6 different cities all across North America. 2 in Europe, 1 in Australia, and of course our friend in Singapore. And I just want to say hello to you folks as well. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I want to thank you for your belief and trust in us as we walk through this minefield of current events together, this minefield of news and information, this white noise that you hear constantly, whether it be on your radio, your TV set, or even in your local written media, and always, of course, on the internet. Our home base is HomelandSecurityUS.com. We're also simulcast by the good graces of the Christians United Broadcasting Network. You can tune into us at the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com. That's the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com. You have to spell it all out. And there you will find our audio and occasional video as well. And I just want to say, Joe, it's great to be with you in studio today. It seems like we're in the same building, in the same room at times, in the same office, yet it seems like we don't talk. Countries apart at times. If anyone who's got a family, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes your countries apart.
Yep.
Even though you're
I'm doing
close
all the
proximity.
work, and he's
Snoozing.
watching TV and sleeping. No, I'm kidding.
Well, watching TV Land. Actually, right. What I have on is I'm trying to remember the name of this. It's on TV Land. I can't remember the 3 old ladies living in the house together.
The Golden Girls?
The Golden Girls. Thank you. It was a senior moment here. No, it was actually flipping, trying to see the coverage of Benghazi, and I stopped there because just a throwback to the 80s. I believe it was the 80s. I don't know. But thank you for saying that. Yeah, you used to sit with Grandma and watch that show while she was sick and until she passed away, But folks, I just want to say this. I'm fired up tonight. Did you ever get really tired, and then you just get tired, not only tired, but you get angry, and then you get angry because you're angry, but you don't know what you're angry about. But you're tired, and the anger just builds, and then you get just more angry because you're angry. And it's a vicious circle. That may not have made sense to many people, but some it does, I know. And with me, the anger is building as I look at Benghazi. I look at these politicians, these elected people that we have up there that are dropping the ball, that are not picking the ball up, and these idiots out there. And I'm sorry I use that word idiot, but these idiots like Rachel Maddow out there that wouldn't know a story if it was crammed down her craw. And these other so-called journalists that couldn't write their way out of a paper bag. What's up with this?
Common sense challenged, or mentally handicapped thinking. No, the title of the show tonight I said it as common sense absent in the USA, and the description. I just wrote a little blurb. It says as long as the U.S., along with the rest of the world, continue down the path of war, famine, and destruction, the majority of the American public have no clue will happen to this nation. Even worse, more people have no desire to understand anything outside of their own selfish thoughts. And that is so true today as we see what is happening in our world falling apart around us, yet people seem to be mentally exempt or with their head in the sand. And a lot of the case we say that, people are ignorant. They don't know or they don't understand, but it's worse than that. And this is a spiritual problem that this nation has and the people in this nation has. It's a problem of the heart. And it will not get better as long as people are living for their own selfish goals. And when I say selfish, I mean people are called to be of service to others. People are called to help others. Helping others can take you can help somebody pick up something they dropped, to help somebody correct a behavior that they are doing wrong. People don't want help. People don't want answers unless it fits into their mindset and into their goals and agendas for themselves and their lives. And now, unlike in the past, where there was a sense of community, a sense of caring for your neighbor, for the next person, today there seems to be what is in 2 Timothy as people becoming lovers of self rather than lovers of God. We see this immaturity almost. It is immaturity with this generation, and it's due to the influx of technology and the ability for people to. There's so many distractions out there. I mean, why bother reading the Bible and understanding what this world is about and why we're here? When you can go out and have a good time with your friends and watch a football game and not think about it. It's very easy for people to just not think there is any consequences because they do not see those consequences, because things of the spiritual world are unseen. So it's not tangible to them.
I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we're just warming up for tonight. You're in for it. Just buckle up tonight. But you're right, Joe. I mean, when you said it's matters of the heart, but you know what? It's matters of the intellect. The conversation earlier before the show with someone talking about Alexis de and I'm sure I'm going to screw this last name up here, de Tocqueville. If you want to correct me in my pronunciation, you can phonetically spell it and send it to me via email, Alexis de Tocqueville. He was a French political thinker, historian. He wrote Democracy in America back in the mid-1800s when he traveled through this country analyzing our living standards, our social condition, the social condition of this country in different people, different societies within America. And he was basically tying together our morality. If you read his works, they're not easy works to get through by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not going to say they're painful reads, but they're very intense reads. But if you do happen to pick up a copy of that, the Democracy in America, he talks about democracy, and he talks about it talks about democracy in the from a detached perspective, if you will. He wrote of his travels through America in the early 19th century and the Western expansion, Jacksonian democracy, and so on, which transformed the fabric of the American way of life. One of his reasons for writing was to help the French, his own citizens, get a better understanding of our society. He felt that our society, the democracy, and I know I understand we are a representative republic, but you also have to understand his words, his word, democracy. He saw it as an equation that balanced liberty and equality, held a concern for the individual as well as the community. So, folks, to, if you want a homework assignment, and I know that you're busy, and I know you folks are busy. You've got 100 million things to do. You get kids take to baseball practice and whatever else you've got to do. You've got to work your second and third jobs just to pay the bills, and you've got 100 things to do on your list. But Alex, and I'll spell the last name, of course, D-E, and then the last name is T like Tom, O-C Charlie. That's T-O-C. Queville. Look at some of his writings, and look at how he contrasts the morality, or I'm sorry, he binds morality of the people with the laws and the just the state of the country back when he went through it versus what's taking place today. We've seen a great separation of this, and it's just it's a failure of morality. It's a failure of common sense. It's a failure of us paying attention, Joe. But we've got a lot of news to get into, a lot of news headlines, and a lot of things. I'll tell you, just like I said, buckle your seatbelts because we're going to rip through some news information that's going to just anger you. It's going to set you. It's going to set the stage.
It should.
Inform, and then but some of this, you tell me that when you read some of this that you're not upset at how we are being played. We're being played for fools.
Yes, and as people are at different levels of understanding and coming to terms with what's going on, you talk about getting angry and frustrated. There was years where I was like that. I felt like that reading these headlines, outraged and angry and wanting to get on the radio and yell and scream about it. And gradually that has changed. But before we get into the headlines, I just want to say thank you to Marianne for sending this book to us. And I started reading it, and I want to recommend everybody get this book or try to read this book. It is called The Bait of Satan, Living Free from the Deadly Trap of Offense. It is a wonderful book. I'm only in the third chapter, I think, but it is something that all Christians must read, and I will be reading excerpts from it here in the near future. But getting into the news, we have so much going on across so many
parts fronts.
Of the yes, between the Middle East. We have news, a lot of news from Syria. We have news on the Benghazi hearings. We have news updates on the Boston situation. News from the White House they're rethinking their plans to arm the Syrian rebels. I don't know if they're going to go over there and recollect what they've already given. But also, the families of slain SEAL Team 6 members were in the news today as a hearing or as a
press conference
was given, and the families came out and basically blamed the government for the deaths of their family members. Now, there is another important part to this story. As an imam,
there's like 6 different parts to this story that we must get into each part individually. I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is so important.
Parents of fallen service members spoke at a press conference on Thursday morning. These are the family members of the SEAL Team 6 soldiers who died in the helicopter crash.
Saturday, August 2011, there were 30 troops killed
Yes.
in the downing. Now, see, this was an intentional downing of a helicopter. I'll set the stage, and you can get into it. Here's the situation. 30 American troops killed in a helicopter downing in Afghanistan on Saturday, August 2011. Now, the Pentagon on Thursday, August 11th, 5 days after the downing, identified the Americans as 17 members of the elite Navy SEALs 5 Special Naval Warfare personnel who support the SEALs 3 Air Force Special Operation personnel and an Army helicopter crew of 5. But here's the deal. There were SEAL Team 6 members, the very SEAL team that went after Osama bin Laden earlier that year. Okay, so that kind of sets the stage.
Yeah, and we have the raid. The whole SEAL Team 6 was not a phrase people knew about, talked about. They knew about Navy SEALs, obviously, but there are different compartments of the Navy SEALs, different teams, if you will.
Right.
And SEAL Team 6, Joe Biden, if you remember, came out and slipped up and said that publicly, that it was the SEAL Team 6. Almost, and this is a mistake that they don't make. It wasn't a script writer that threw that, or the speech writer who threw it in there. That would be weird, too careful. They would have caught that. For whatever reason, I think it came out on purpose from Mr. Biden. And I think it could have had something to do with what happened with the helicopter crashing. But there was a press conference today, as we said, an event during which the families of the fallen SEAL team members accused the U.S. government of complicity in the deaths of their sons. The families highlighted a number of grievances, including the notion that military brass invited a Muslim cleric to their children's funeral in 2011. An imam who they claim spoke in Arabic and placed a curse on these servicemen.
And I've got a little issue with how this is being reported. For example, if you look at the official translation of the funeral reading, well, first of all, we shouldn't even be in this venue. When I say that, I'm talking about the United States military. Stephen Coughlin, who is an expert, an Islamic expert. In fact, he wrote a lot for the Pentagon and was fired for it. Basically walked back the claims that this was a curse, saying, well, it could be something totally different. You know what? This is dancing around the issue. This is totally the interpretation of the Quranic or the references from the Quran. You're dancing around the issue. You've got a situation, folks, where where you have the families of the SEAL Team 6, the families of our troops in a service in Afghanistan, reportedly disallow a Judeo-Christian minister or any presence of a minister, a Christian minister, and instead invite a Muslim cleric to the funeral of fallen Navy SEAL Team 6 heroes. The cleric disparaged in Arabic the memory of these men by damning them as infidels to Allah. Okay, in what, again, now if this doesn't anger you, upset you, and say, it doesn't matter to me if we argue over the semantics of the passage of the Quran. The fact is, the larger fact is, how in the world did we get to the point where we say, well, we really can't have a minister here, or we're not going to have a minister here. Instead, we're going to have an imam preside over the funerals, say a few words from the Quran, not from the Bible, not from the Holy Bible, but from the Holy Quran, and so we sit here today arguing about semantics, arguing about the interpretation of the Quranic passages. I think the argument is in the wrong venue. Am I wrong?
No, you're not. Three of the family's fallen Navy SEAL Team 6 Special Forces members and one family of an Army National Guardsman held the event at the National Press Club to make this startling allegation, among many others. Their children perished during a fatal Chinook helicopter crash that occurred in Afghanistan on the 6th of August 2011.
Right.
The presser was an effort, as noted in a press release, to corroborate the notion that the U.S. government is as much responsible for the deaths of their son as is the Taliban. Now, it goes on to say that there is a prayer given, and as for the claim about the Muslim cleric, the families believe the faith leader attempted to intentionally sully the memory of their sons by damning them as infidels to Allah. The group showed video of the prayer to prove their contentions, complete with translation. And you can find that article on the Blaze I posted in the chat room.
But it's not limited only to this particular issue of this imam reading from the Quran. That to me would just, if that was my son, my daughter, my brother, or whatever, it would send me into orbit. The fact that it's my fellow countryman sends me into orbit as well. But here's what this press conference held today talked about. There are half a dozen issues, and I'm in no particular order, but each one has to stand on its own merit. First of all, Obama and Vice President Biden having disclosed on the 4th of May of 2011 that Navy SEAL Team 6 carried out the successful raid on bin Laden's compound that resulted in his death. What did they do by doing that? In what venue is it proper for a commander-in-chief or a political mechanism, the putative president of the United States, Obama, and Biden, the vice president? Tell me how much sense it makes to identify the team that took out Obama or Osama, if in fact that was Osama bin Laden in that compound. And we've got questions about that. Yeah, and we were talking about that earlier today. That whole incident is shrouded by clouds. And I don't care if you are the most non-conspiratorial person on the planet. You're telling me we have this secret mission where we go into this compound to take out allegedly Osama bin Laden, who's been under surveillance for well over a year, who's living in Pakistan, who, by the way, is living right near a military school equated to one of our, you can equate it to West Point here in the United States. And of course, no one knows. And then the surprise raid, take out Osama bin Laden. No one sees his corpse. It's buried at sea.
They watched the video in real time of him being taken out, but then we learned there was no video. You
can be damn sure there was video.
Well, they weren't watching it as they claimed to be. They were.
It was a staged photo op picture, is what you're saying, and I agree with that. Yes.
And then we have the issue of Osama bin Laden being sick and in CIA care. Reported back in 2001, he was on dialysis as early as 1998, I think. The question of him, Madeleine Albright threatened an October surprise on Bush's second term about him rolling out bin Laden from the freezer.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he was reported dead about 19 times before Obama came out last May 1st.
It's like Weekend at Bernie's, part 6. It's just crazy.
I don't have the clip uploaded, but you can go search Dick Cheney says no evidence Osama bin Laden was involved in 9/11. It's just this big circle of lies. But what I want to do now is to go back 1 year to a clip about Syria. This is the Obama administration will seek international permission to attack Syria. Will inform Congress of the plan.
By the way, this does all tie together. Just so you know,
Yes.
we don't have ADD. All of this ties together.
Yes, this is a flashback in time. If you will remember this.
As Syria continues to unravel, the president says he wants to exhaust diplomatic efforts. But for the first time, signs that President Obama has started discussing options with his military.
The President of the United States, through the National Security Staff, has asked us to begin the commander's estimate of the situation.
CNN was first to report military planning was underway. On Wednesday, the nation's top officer told a Senate committee those options include humanitarian relief, a no-fly zone, intervention at sea, and airstrikes.
But I want to be clear. We can do anything. The question is, so it's not about can we do it, it's should we do it.
Senator John McCain continued to insist the U.S. should.
Can you tell us how much longer the killing would have to continue? How many additional civilian lives would have to be lost? How many more have to die? 10,000 more? 20,000 more?
Before I recommend that we put our sons and daughters in uniform in harm's way, I've got to make very sure that we know what the mission is. I've got to make very sure that we know whether we can achieve that mission.
Panetta said U.S. ground troops are not being considered. U.S. concerns, however, a fractured opposition with nearly 100 groups. Airstrikes could take hundreds of aircraft and weeks of bombing to destroy Syria's air defenses.
They have approximately 5 times more more sophisticated air defense systems than existed in Libya, covering 1/5 of the terrain.
Panetta said it wouldn't make sense for the U.S. to act unilaterally, but he set off a firestorm when he said the U.S. would want international permission, but might not seek congressional approval for military action.
Our goal would be to seek international permission, and we would come to the Congress and inform you.
I'm almost breathless about that, because what I heard you say is we're going to seek international approval, and they will come and tell the Congress what we might do, and we might seek congressional approval.
Now, we just finished talking to Senator Sessions privately a few minutes ago, and he remains very concerned, Wolf. His feeling is that time may be running out in Syria, but not for Assad. He thinks time may be running out for the U.S. and the allies to intervene, that Assad actually in recent days and weeks has been gaining momentum on the ground in Syria, and that the administration could be desperately wrong, that it may not be inevitable that Assad's regime will fall. So this is all shaping up to be quite a dire situation for many different reasons, Wolf.
Yeah, seems to be going from bad to worse in Syria. All right, thanks very much, Barbara. Meanwhile...
All right, that was a clip from 1 year ago, and what they were talking about was how they would not go to Congress if they wanted to launch a war against Syria, that they would seek international approval, and then they would let Congress know what they plan to do. Now, here is Chuck Hagel. I'm going to play a short clip. This is less than a minute, stating the White House is rethinking its opposition to arming Syrian rebels. And we're going to tie this all in here after this.
We must continue to look at options and present those options based on all contingencies with the focus that we all have, I think, in the international community to achieve the objectives the best way we can. So we're constantly evaluating. I think the President noted it a couple of days ago in his press conference talking about rethinking options. Of course we do.
So you are rethinking, the administration is rethinking its opposition to arming the rebels?
Yes.
A firm yes for the first time from the Secretary of Defense. The White House now rethinking whether it might decide to provide arms to the rebels. It would be very difficult for them to do.
Yeah, it's thinking about not arming the Syrian rebels, arming the Syrian rebels. Well, they already have armed the Syrian rebels. And today, the U.S. has sent another $100 million aid package as part of humanitarian aid, they say, from the State Department, which will bring a total provided aid to $510 million. this year. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry announced a new aid during his visit to Rome on Thursday, detailing that the funds will be used to support 1.4 Syrian refugees that have been displaced during the civil war. Much of the aid will be given to countries that are now home to refugee camps, including Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey. And it goes on to say that Jordan will receive $43 million to support the country's United Nations humanitarian programs.
Aren't you folks glad that your tax dollars are actually going to fund the refugees that are living in a situation created by the State Department, by the Brennans, by the Clintons of the world, by the Obamas of the world? This is where your money is going. So the next time that you stroke that check for your income tax, just understand that you're actually, funding in part the situation that we created, that we are creating, and we have to ask ourselves. Now, this is not right now. I'm kind of going out of order here from the script, but who benefits? Just keep that in the back of your mind. Who benefits from this insane policy that we have? And as the program unfolds, we're going to talk about a few things about Syria, and about Libya, and about Benghazi. What people don't want you to hear, including the other side of the Benghazi story. Folks, you know what the other side of the Benghazi story is? The front side, of course, the side that they don't want you to know about, the side that everyone says is a big conspiracy. When I say everyone, I'm talking about, it's a conspiracy theory, I'm talking about, the progressives, is the gun running operation to the Free Syrian Army and the anti-Assad terrorists. Okay, that's the one side of the coin. But do you know what the other side of the coin is? It's the drug running operation and the money laundering operation. That's the other side of this coin. No one has touched that. No one is touching that. Yet it's so evident. So understand that there are two sides to this coin, and this coin remains just spinning on the dining room table there, as everyone is just fixated upon its spinning. No one is stopping it and saying, wait a second. What kind of coin is this? So Joe did a very good job in giving you a taste of history and a taste of present in this schizophrenic and quite illegal operation that we have, and the illegality. And isn't it funny that that Clinton and Obama himself is trying to tie us to the small arms trade treaty with the United Nations, yet is breaking international law. And I just love 5 minutes with Colbert or the other morons out there, Bill Maher and Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell, who refused to even address this issue, and some of the most despicable human beings on the planet, which occupy the seats in Congress. My goodness, who are just dishonoring our men, our women in uniform, and more importantly than that, dishonoring each and every one of us. That's right. You know what? And it goes back to the who benefits part. We and Joe heard part of this conversation earlier as I was taking notes from a source of a friend of mine. A source, we are indeed a captured operation. And if we look at this, we've warned people, we've attempted to warn people when the enemy was nothing but a dust cloud in the distance, and that dust cloud has turned into a full-fledged attack on the outer walls of our compound of our nation, and they've breached the outer walls of our nation, and now they're on the inner walls of our nation. At what point do we say, all right, now we've got to start fighting back and taking this down? It's just an incredible thing, and that's why I'm frustrated, because the dots are all there. Do people have to use crayon to actually, like on the news, instead of the high-tech things that they have? Maybe we should go back to chalkboards and crayon.
People would have to want to read before. You wouldn't need crayon. You would need to literally have the audio and the text, because people don't want to read. They don't want to look into what's going on. We have a clip here of Judge Napolitano talking about Hillary Clinton in regards to the Benghazi testimony. And as that story continues to unfold, there are many people who have many different opinions on the Benghazi situation, what should happen, what went wrong, if things could have been different. But one thing was odd, and you and me watched this video clip before the show today, and we did not upload it. 19 minutes of Rachel Maddow talking, but
And I'm sure we'll get a lot of thank you emails for not uploading that, but that's okay.
It was about the Benghazi situation, among a few other things. But what was interesting about it, and something that we point out a lot here from MSNBC or Fox or whoever does it, they completely they talk, the spin. That's what they call the media, how they spin the story. If you ever watched I don't know, what's the name of the YouTube clip you showed me about the old newscast outtakes, or when Clinton was sitting there and they showed the old CNN stuff, the fake war stuff. They showed they were explaining how you spin if somebody says something to you that is important, or a question that you don't want to answer, how you can turn it around and spin it back so you're avoiding it and not answering the question, but yet do you remember what I'm talking about? You don't. You have no idea. Anyway,
I've got the deer in the headlights look. Yeah.
Rachel Maddow, when talking about the Benghazi hearings, made it not about what happened, what was said in the testimony given by the whistleblowers, not what was said by the administration, but about conspiracy theorists and right-wing lunatic fringe.
Yeah, it's always that. And I was holding up this short book, "The Thinker's Guide to Fallacies." I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. It's folks. I've got to tell you, if you have, it's 56 pages in length. 55 pages in length. It's called "The Thinker's Guide to Fallacies: The Art of Mental Trickery and Manipulation." It's just about all you need to know about the American press today. By the way, since you allowed me this opening here, Joe, I want to let the people know, in case you don't know, for example, how this media is so saturated. Just think of this: the head of CBS News, his brother, or Jeff Fager, by the way, that's the head of CBS News. His brother is the Obama speechwriter. Yep. Obama's speechwriter. So, and by the way, CBS News, Jeff Fager, went full force, both barrels, 100 miles an hour against Cheryl Atkinson when she was reporting on Benghazi. And he said, no, she's just borderline. She's on the border of being an advocate, or borderline advocacy, instead of reporting. Are you kidding me? Reporting facts is now advocacy for... Yes.
And then go to Martin Bashir. What's the big deal about the Benghazi situation? They're making a big deal out of nothing. This is a non-story, a non-issue, they say. It's absolutely mind-blowing.
And people have
there were 4 deaths, and you were talking with your source, one of your sources before the show, about Watergate for a while.
Yeah.
Nobody died during Watergate. Well, at least not in the...
not in the... Exactly. Not in the plan, but...
we have 4 American servicemen who died as a result of inaction from our executive branch and State Department, a negligence that was preventable. They did not have to die. These people did not need to lose their lives. And Correct. You have people on the left and on the right trying to use it to get political favor, which is completely uncalled for in any situation.
That's
to
right.
politicize an issue in such a way that it is... because when I see Fox doing this, we got to get to the truth about Benghazi. Well, you didn't get to the truth about 9/11. So
right, but for different reasons. And now that we've got more people joining us here live, I just want to say this, folks. Here is why we need a broader investigation very quickly. Because Joe's got so much good information. I got to tell you, he did the bulk of the research for today. I was busy having a tantrum. But here is why we're not going to get why yesterday. And I spent during the night watching the hearings. If you want to spend I felt like 6 hours of my time. I think from 1 o'clock Eastern to 7 o'clock Eastern, I was watching or attempting to watch in between bouts of unconsciousness,
And I know
watching the hearings.
you've done so much research into
Well,
this that you really are an exception to this. What I'm going to say, but I would recommend nobody waste their time to watch the Benghazi hearings. But anyway,
but I had to, because I had to get the case. I mean, it's one thing to see the clips; it's another to see the entire hearing. And I mean, the hearing in its entirety. And boy, don't do that to yourself. Don't torture yourself, okay? Unless you've got nitro there. But here is the situation with this, and here's why we need the larger broad spectrum hearings, a la Watergate, because everything has been compartmentalized. Now that we have new listeners tuning into this, understand this. You have got, just like the Boston bombing, remember the pictures, and perhaps the mental pictures will do best for you. Remember the pictures. Oh, look, that looks like a SEAL team. Oh, look, that looks like a couple of DHS guys. Oh, look, those look like a couple of feds. Oh, look, that looks like they're from this agency. Oh, look, the military may be represented. You have all of these different organizations represented. Well, why is that? Have you ever thought about why? Okay, for example, why would they be? Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because if there is a plan, they all have their particular plan. If one plan goes awry, another one can be implemented. But at the end of the day, if you question say the team of SEAL, two SEAL members or two DHS members or whatever, they don't know what the other people are doing. So it's highly compartmentalized. So yesterday, what you saw was one compartment. In other words, it wasn't a full hearing about the entire Benghazi issue. It was a very, very narrow line, very limited line of questioning. So, for example, Hicks testifying about, well, I don't think there was air support available. Well, he doesn't know what was available to, if he's speaking at a State Department level, he might not know what's available on a defense level or another, or a CIA level, or other agency level. Okay, so there are multiple agencies involved. You've got to understand there are multiple agencies involved, and there are walls between the agencies. Everything is roped off, compartmentalized. So they don't know. For a reason, they don't know. So when you ask just one sector, one segment, one part of that, they are not going to know the entire whole story. So some of the information, some of the questions that are asked and answered will back up the official narrative, while the others won't. And this is why, once again, we need the broader spectrum hearings to bring in all of the players and say, okay, now who was running this show? In the end, who was running this show? Was it Brennan, who had his hit teams out there in northern Africa prior to Benghazi, the attacks? Yes, hit teams. Was it the State Department? Was it the Department of Defense? Who was calling the shots here? And where did the gazillions of dollars go that were spent on the operations? Were there any weapons collected? Where did they go? But what about the warehouses there that are Qatari and Saudi Arabian owned? Were they used for weapons storage? If so, why? Why not use the depots where they were held? See, all of these questions could not be answered properly. So what I'm saying to you folks is we need to push for broader hearings, because this country has been captured. We are a captured nation. But who benefits in the end? Obviously, it's the agenda of the Saudis. And who backs the Saudis but the globalists, the people who want to control your future, your savings, your money, and of course the future in terms of oil and energy and gas. And you could take it back to Bush if you want to. I'm not just good.
It goes back to 100 years before Bush, but
exactly.
It's not. These hearings are just theater. There is nothing important. This country is so far gone. It does not matter, in my opinion, really. What if Obama's impeached? They would have another one of their useful tools there to fill in his place and continue the agenda that was set out before the birth of Obama, even, that they are pushing for a one world government, and that's what they're going to get. We're going to.
But we're lacking the unity of outrage among the American people. There's no unity
We're
of
lacking
outrage.
a unity of understanding. We're lacking a unity, period. Unity under righteousness, under truth. We can't even do that. And it is sad to see the Christian people in such disarray. And there's an article from the New American today. Christians rebuke God. And we're going to get into a little bit of that. Some other headlines and things we're going to talk about today. We are going to get into...
De Tocqueville, thank you. I'm sorry, De Tocqueville, Alexis De Tocqueville. Thank you for that phonetic assistance in pronunciation. Alexis De Tocqueville.
Okay.
For those of you joining us late, anyone who wants to, some interesting reading about him and his assessment of America in the mid-19th century. Interesting reads. Sorry.
No problem. We have radioactive water released into Lake Michigan. Also, Al-Qaeda now in control of CIA's covert war in Syria. That we'll get into where that's coming from. Also, the Department of Justice stating we do not need warrants for email and Facebook chats. Also, the House passes Pay China First Act, which is a bill that would require the government to pay back foreign nations before spending funds on domestic items.
Why not? Let our bridges crumble, let our roads crumble, let our infrastructure crumble, to be more accurate. Meanwhile, let's just pump up the others, right? I mean, isn't that what we're doing?
Yeah, and if we have debt, if we have actual debt that we owe, it's our duty to repay that debt. But
says who?
Well, that's what we can talk about, if the debt is real or not, if we really owe anything. And that answer is no, obviously, because it's all from interest and the macroeconomics and Federal Reserve System banking that we have in place. But regardless of if we owe money or not, we have a bigger problem than that, because what good is money going to be when there is nowhere to spend it at? What good is money going to be when...
Well, you're looking at a Mad Max scenario then, aren't you?
No, not necessarily. You see we have changes in what's going on with our weather, the sinkholes are getting worse. We have droughts in the U.S. We have, I don't know if you've checked the famine. There's a famine map that shows you real-time droughts, what's going on in different parts of the world. There are very severe droughts in places in third world countries, a lot of third world countries. They don't need droughts to starve to death. And so imagine the suffering that's going on down there.
If I was a conspiracy theorist, I'd say that these droughts were being helped by things being sprayed in the air, but what do I know?
Yeah, they're definitely manipulating the weather, as they admit. We also have information on Boston bombings. Boston police chief says the FBI never shared warnings about marathon bomber.
Oh, I want to thank Eric, by the way. I'm going to punch in here real quick. I want to thank Eric. Thank you so much for sending this email. He says, hi, guys. Aaron Burnett and Juliet Kaim, who covered the Boston bombing, well, they're both members of the Council on Foreign Relations, and it all curtails to their agenda. Eric, thank you very much. And I think that we have to look at that as well. Look at who's controlling the news, and the news, of course, being funneled through people that are members of the CFR. Don't underestimate the influence of the Council on Foreign Relations. Do not underestimate what their influence. But thank you, Eric, for that email. God bless you.
Yeah. And back to this Paying China First Act. I just saw this. They say they're going to have to pay China back. This law would make them have to pay China back before issuing checks for Social Security. That's kind of frightening, if that were the case, because we know how tight money is. And I heard today on Bloomberg Radio that the budget, if we make it to October of this year, they were going to come up against the debt ceiling problem again. But anyways, so we have the SEAL Team 6 family members giving a press conference today. We had the Benghazi hearings, and I'm going to play a clip now of Judge Napolitano talking about the consequences for Hillary Clinton if, hypothetically, we actually followed the law in this country and people were arrested for their crimes. And you're muted.
Oh yeah. By the way, originally I didn't see the value of this clip until you played it again, and I would urge everyone to listen to this very carefully.
Here's Judge Napolitano. Hillary Clinton could be prosecuted over Benghazi testimony.
The subject is Benghazi, and a report running on FoxNews.com written by James Rosen. And the essence of it is that the State Department, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, doing an end run around their own counterterrorism bureau, really to whitewash this thing or get the word terrorism removed from it. So, Judge Andrew Napolitano, let me ask you, what are the legal implications?
Well, the legal implications for the Obama administration in general, Mike, and first, good afternoon, or in Chicago time, good morning. It's always a pleasure to be with you. The legal implications for the administration are profound, and for Mrs. Clinton would be personal and extremely profound. Because if what James Rosen has so wonderfully reported can be demonstrated under oath and in a credible way out of the mouths of James's sources, that would substantially contradict Mrs. Clinton's testimony. Now, I don't know if her testimony was given under oath, but it doesn't matter because lying to Congress carries the same criminal liability and the same punishment as lying under oath to Congress. I'm not suggesting that Mrs. Clinton lied, but I'm saying that a case could be made out either legally in a courtroom if a prosecutor wanted to, and certainly politically in the public sphere, should she decide to seek higher office, that she materially misled the Congress during that famous "what difference does it make" testimony of hers, which was substantially at odds with what James is reporting his sources have told him.
Now, there's one section from that report, from the James Rosen report, that says there was an effort early on to delete all references to Al-Qaeda in the early documentation that came out of the State Department. If that's there, if it proves true, are we talking about some kind of an obstruction charge?
Well, no, it wouldn't be obstruction of justice unless someone could argue that the cables and the information that came from the State Department after the event had concluded impeded the ability of the FBI and American intelligence agents to find the culprits who did this. So that would be the obstruction. Obstruction means interference with a criminal investigation or a criminal prosecution. It does not mean interference with the dissemination of the truth. So, for example, if it turns out that Ambassador Rice was lying, we know she made material misrepresentations. She said she articulated what she was told to say, but she can't really tell us who told her. But if it turns out she was lying, that is not a crime because it was not under oath, it was not to Congress, and it didn't materially interfere with a prosecution. It would be a political wrong, and her boss, the president, would suffer for it egregiously, but she couldn't be prosecuted for it. On the other hand, Mrs. Clinton was giving testimony before a United States Senate committee, and she had not only the moral but the legal obligation to tell the truth as she understood it at the time.
You know, in order to make a case, you're going to have to prove motivation at some point. There was something that was causing the president, there was something that was causing the Secretary of State to do this, and the only motivation I see right now is just a desire to not use the T word, to not call this thing terrorism, to say no terrorist attacks happened on our watch.
Well, the big motivation is the president's reelection. At the time that Secretary Rice made the statements she made, the whole world thought that Mitt Romney stood a fighting chance of beating Barack Obama, and depending upon when all this sunk in and its relationship to the first of the debates, that Mitt Romney, in fact, would actually lose. So there's reason to suppose that the administration's dancing around the truth here was motivated by the president's desire to get reelected, or at least to put this to the back burner until after Election Day. Now it's on the front burner. This is not going to affect the president's reelection. Obviously, it's a done deal, but it can certainly affect his peace of mind and his political success for the remaining 3.5 years of his second term, and it could affect the political future and even arguably the freedom of Mrs. Clinton.
But still, the motivation is just to say, nothing happened on my watch. I kept Americans secure wherever they were around the world,
yes,
correct?
Yes, and okay. We now know that if that was a motivation, it was a false and a fraudulent one.
Right. In terms of Hillary Clinton, is she at all subject? Is she vulnerable to this at all? I mean, not just politically, but when we're talking to you, let's talk about criminal.
Okay. As a textbook case, yes, she's vulnerable. But as a practical matter, the president controls federal criminal prosecutions for as long as he's president through his Attorney General, Eric Holder. It is almost inconceivable that he would authorize Attorney General Holder to permit a U.S. attorney somewhere, probably in Washington, D.C., to seek an indictment of Mrs. Clinton for materially misleading Congress. It's the same charge that Roger Clemens was tried for. Now, the statute of limitations is 5 years, so it goes into a period of time after Barack Obama's presidency is concluded, but it's extremely unlikely, whatever she does in 2016, that she'd be prosecuted between now and 2016, and it's unlikely that she'd be prosecuted after 2016 because too much time will have passed.
Well, as I mentioned right before that clip started, and Joe found that clip, and I thought it was. Initially, I thought, well, what exactly would that benefit listeners from hearing from that? But here's a couple of things that stuck out in my mind, and once again, we have to go back 40 years. What lessons did we learn? What happened with Watergate, for example? Now, Watergate happened. The break-in actually happened at the Democratic National Committee headquarters. And by the way, it was a series of break-ins, but the one where they were caught was June 17th of 1972. Don't forget, that was an election year. Benghazi happened on September 11th, 2012, also an election year. It took 2 years, ultimately 2 years, for this to reach the doorstep of the White House to cause Nixon to resign back in August 9th, 1974. So it took time. And as I had written in my article that appeared in CanadaFreePress.com as well as HomelandSecurityUS.com, the Watergate affair resulted in the indictment, the trial, the conviction, and incarceration of some 43 people, and many dozens were Nixon's top aides and administration officials. We have a carbon copy, if you will, only to the extent that of a pattern. It obviously, people were killed in Benghazi. We cannot forget that. And Benghazi is much more severe, but if you look at the template of events and the politics side of it, you're looking at the very same template. Well, we can't make this an election issue. So they didn't. Now they're going after now they're looking at Hillary Clinton. Did she lie to Congress? And of course, that's a felony, 5-year statute of limitations.
It's only a felony if you're an athlete taking steroids, from my understanding.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't not apply to the politicians who sit in office.
Well,
they are above the law.
Man. But see, what we need here is, and people may be getting fatigued by hearing about Benghazi.
Yes.
But so fatigued. But if you understand, and I cannot, there's just no way I can otherwise say this. If you understand that understanding Benghazi will provide you, it's like if you want to know about Christianity, somebody hands you a Bible. If you want to know about the agenda as it is right now, somebody hands you the articles and game plan of Benghazi. It's the same principle to an extent. It shows you the way. It shows you what's going on here. And we have to understand this, because what we're facing is the extermination of millions of people, if not a billion or more people, because this will ignite a war that will soon go. Look, I'm waiting any day, folks, any day now, for something to take place in Syria that will ignite a regional war. And everything that we're seeing happening with respect to Iran, don't forget Syria is the back door to Iran.
Wait a second. You're waiting for something to happen. There is already a war, regional war, being carried out in Syria right now.
A larger, more
You're talking about a
visible
multinational
yes
coalition from both sides of the aisle.
Exactly, and don't forget what the intent here. And if you go back to the previous clip, the intent here is to have an air cap and NATO involvement, U.S. involvement in Syria to topple Assad. And once that happens, do you think for a moment, for example, that that's going to or that's not going to have any effect on Israel's ability to take out missiles that are destined for them, such as the Fatah missiles that they took out here over the past weekend? Of course it is. So are we going against our own ally in the Middle East? Yes. Is Obama doing this intentionally? Is this administration doing this intentionally? Well, look at the Muslim Brotherhood infiltration. But see, the Muslim Brotherhood is a tool of the globalists. So we have to think bigger. The lie, folks, is bigger than you can even begin to imagine. Please understand how big this lie is.
Yeah, we don't even have to, imagine it. We don't have to go down that far because it is really, we know that they are evil. We see their fruits, we see what they're doing, and we really now, seeing what they're doing, seeing the events that are taking place, need to focus on ourselves more than anything, because our spiritual health is the only thing that will get us out of this, and maybe not actually literally get us out of it in the physical, but it will definitely get us out of it.
I agree, Joe. I agree. But we still have to educate people, because there are still people coming to the table thirsty for and hungry for the truth that we still have to educate. Yes, right. I agree.
And this
100%.
is something I want to talk about on the other side, is the influx of knowledge and how it is creating an atmosphere which leads to people being deceived at a massive rate. And it is not because of a lack of information, the right information. It is because when the knowledge has been increased, there are so many different trains of thoughts you can subscribe to. Basically, the itching ears, as it says in the Bible, people will look for teachings that they want to hear instead of those that they need to hear. Teachings that they want or think to be true, hope to be true, because the way they live doesn't go with what is actually true. But we're going to hit that on the other side, as long as some other stories, including some news on the Obamacare and the death panels and the Department of Justice and warrantless spying on Americans. And that is nothing new, as we've been reporting on that for a while now. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report this Thursday, May 9th, 2013. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hi, folks. Doug Hagmann here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eilena Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world.
If I were the devil, If I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. Thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old, I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage school.
You want answers? I think I can tell you. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this, the 9th day of May 2013. This is hour number 2. I want to welcome those of you just joining us for this hour. I want to say hello to you folks, both in North America, Central America, and also overseas. Want to just welcome you into the program, and want to let you know our home base is HomelandSecurityUS.com. And our neighbors to the north, CanadaFreePress.com.
I actually want to say this because I was contacted today from the Trumpet Communications Network in Trinidad in the West Indies.
Nice. Yeah, actually, folks, there are, our show is broadcast, and I'm not saying this is the case there, but our show is broadcast through various other outlets. So we've been reaching a lot of people, and we want to thank you for your support and your trust and your assistance in spreading the word. It's great. Now, we apologize for the abbreviated version of Paul Harvey, but
I listened to that clip before I downloaded it because I found the best sound quality. And I know we've played it numerous times on the show before, but I don't know if Blog Talk it screwed up on the upload, but
well, if folks, you can find that on the internet. Paul Harvey, "If I Were the Devil." It's quite timely, even though it's 50 going on 50 years old now. It's quite timely to what we're seeing. I also want to take this
in this audio that "If I Were the Devil." He was talking about what would they do, and what he was explaining are things that we have already seen come to pass for the most part. Infiltrate schools, teach people that God is a myth and man is the reason for creating. Take God out of schools, take God out of society, fill it with vain things, fill it with material things. Basically turning an individual into a self-absorbed person lacking an understanding of holy things, and we see that today, and this is the reason our society has decayed to the level it has, and it is not one thing we can put our finger on except the people.
That's right. And he said some. I mean, he says so eloquently too, for that time period. And I think a lot of people during that time may have. You know what? Pretty much like today, the people who understand it got it. The people who didn't marginalized the message, and as well as the individual, as well as Paul Harvey, much like today.
Sadly, I'm learning people really. The saying is true. People will attack and what they don't understand. People will come after
more so than what they don't agree with.
Right, and it's this is what something I wanted to talk about was the this book, The Bait of Satan. It talks about being offended.
Okay, now before you get into the bait of Satan, because I know that that's a kind of a lengthy conversation there, I just want to remind people, folks. Let me ask you, what are you doing the first weekend in June 7th, 8th, and 9th? If you have the opportunity, let me just say this: we are proud, very humbled as well, to be asked to accompany Susan Price, Gold Star mother of fallen Marine Aaron Kennefic from Western New York, who was killed, executed, if you will, in Afghanistan during the Battle of Ganjgal. She's going to be speaking at the Mount Pisgah Baptist Church in Apex, North Carolina, which is not too far from Raleigh, and we've been invited to speak with her as well, and we're humbled by that invitation. We'll be there in person, giving our presentation as well as supporting Susan Price. So if you wanted to see us in person, if you want just a fantastic, and I mean, we've got some fantastic things planned for that weekend, along with Susan Price. Clear your schedule, or just come on down. Especially if you're listening to this right now in the Raleigh area, Raleigh, North Carolina area, or within driving distance, I'd recommend that. It would be a great chance to meet listeners from that area. We know we've got quite a few. Attendance is limited, so. And it's my understanding right now. We're still working out the details, but it's my understanding we'll be there. We'll probably be doing the show on the 7th from near there or there. I'm not sure how we're going to be doing that, but then the 8th is Saturday, and we'll be there. And of course, for Sunday services and the Sunday part of things on the 9th. So definitely invite everyone to be with us. We're going to be putting up, as soon as I get the approval of with respect to the graphic, and we're going to be putting up the link to the registration form. If you think you can go, definitely register, because like I said, attendance is limited, and it's going to be an extremely important topic. It's national insecurity is the topic, and you're going to hear some things that are just going to blow your socks off, guarantee it. So with that, Joe. Oh, and by the way, I just want to give a shout out to both the Freeze Dry Guy and Granlund Firearms, who have sponsored this program for tonight. Granlund Firearms, if you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, click on the link to Granlund Firearms. They've got a wide array of firearms, hunting equipment, survival gear, and Carl and Lori Granlund are just great people. And of course, you got to grab a T-shirt. Very great. I like their T-shirts.
Yeah, their new T-shirts are great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But
right,
yeah, I'm gonna read this real quick, and just because I see this so much within the church, we talk about this a lot: the separation, the division, the betrayal within our own community. And the person who wrote this book, his name is John Bevere, and he really encapsulates what offense is, being offended, and how it affects our faith. And I'll be real quick with this, but this is very important. It talks about walls of protection that we put up. Proverbs 18:5 chapter 18, verse 19 says, "A brother offended is harder to win than a strong city, and contentions are like the bars of a castle." So an offended brother or sister is harder to win than a fortified city. And think about that for a minute. Then the reason he goes on to say that what he means is they keep unwelcome inhabitants and invaders out. This is the walls of protection. All entrants are screened. Those who this is talking about the old system of the protecting a city back in thousands of years ago. They didn't let people in. They had the big gates. But he said, we do this in our own mind. We construct walls so we're not hurt, to safeguard our hearts and prevent any future wounds. We become selective, denying entry to all we fear could or will hurt us. We filter out anyone we think owes us something. We withhold access to these people until they have paid their debts in full. We open our lives only to those we believe are on our side. Yet often these people who are on our side are offended as well. But it goes on to say the focus of offended Christians is inward and introspective. We guard our rights and personal relationships carefully. And it goes on to say that unconstitutional love gives others the right to hurt us, and in doing so, we guard very strongly against these. But
unconditional love.
The strongholds, 2 Corinthians 10, 4 and 5, "For weapons of warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ." Now we see the word and phrase there, knowledge of God. We have knowledge of God, and we have general knowledge. Now, what is the difference? I've always asked this in the Bible. Have you ever read a Bible verse where it talks about wisdom will destroy you, or the wisdom of the wicked, or they make many distinctions that all knowledge is not good knowledge. And the reason is because man is carnal minded, and we can take knowledge from Scripture, but if it's not used correctly, it is destructive. The knowledge of God's Word without love is a destructive force because it puffs us up with pride and legalism. This causes us to justify ourselves rather than repent of the unforgiveness. It creates an atmosphere in which we can be deceived, because knowledge without the love of God will lead to deceptions. Also, it talks about the information generation. And the Bible says about this time, people will be always learning, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Well, how is it that if you're always learning, you can't ever find the truth? And it goes on to say that people in the church, the body of the church, are running from church to church to escape offense, most professing to be the lordship of Jesus while they cannot forgive. It doesn't matter how up to date you are on new revelations from seminars and Bible schools that you have attended, or how many books you've read, or even how many hours you pray and study. If you are offended and in unforgiveness and refuse to repent of this sin, you have not come to the knowledge of truth. You are deceived and confuse others with your hypocritical lifestyle. No matter what the revelation, your fruits tell a different story. You'll become a spring spewing out bitter waters that will bring deception and not truth. And when I was reading this today, that bothered me, because I don't want to be a person spewing out bitter waters, bringing deception. And I know you don't want to be either. And that's why it's so important that our foundation needs to be in the Lord. And the whole reason I brought this up today is because yesterday we had Augusto Perez on, and he was referencing other historical books. I'm not sure, I don't remember the name of the one book, but he referenced
The Book of Manuscripts.
Okay. And he was doing so in a manner of a historical perspective. Now, people, a lot of times, it seemed that they were offended, like he was looking at it as Scripture. But that is not the case, and you could see people get angry and they'll shut off right there because just like when the remote viewing thing came up, when he mentioned how this is what the remote viewers are saying, people automatically thought, well, this is who he listens to, or this is what he, basically believes or follows to get his information. And the whole thing is frustrating. And I say this because we are supposed to be united. We are supposed to not only love each other as friends, but we are supposed to love our enemies. But if we can't even love each other, how can we love our enemies? How can we even love ourselves? And I just see this divide in the people in general who believe in the Lord, and I'm guilty of it a lot too. We need to set aside all the little things that what was the Kevin James comic special? Don't sweat the small stuff, right? That's a very profound saying. I mean, don't worry about the little things, as I see so many do when we talk about the rapture. People, argue about the time of the rapture. They argue about this time, when things will happen, how they will happen, when they make no difference in how we as people behave, live, or should make no difference in anything we do in our daily lives. We need to learn how to. We need to grow in our faith and learn how to get past this. If we want to be effective and don't want to be deceived ourselves, this is for our own spiritual health. And I'll stop there and get back into the news, but I'll have more definitely on this in a much more organized fashion as I just started reading this book today. But it makes a lot of sense as when I was reading it, and it put a lot of things into perspective for me. And I will continue to share. But back to the news.
I want to bring this up because I'm not sure how many people know about this. The Gang of Eight, of course, the eight representing the Democrats, Republicans, what's going on right now with respect to this national ID card. Folks, have you heard about this? I think this is pretty important. You know the Gang of Eight. I just call them a gang. And in fact, these politicians are deciding they're pounding out this immigration reform bill, which is going to be nothing more than a blanket amnesty. You can count on that. What's hidden in here? You're going to hear over the next numerous days about this national immigration reform. But what you're not going to hear is what's inside this bill. If this bill is passed, it would require every American to obtain a national ID card to work legally within the United States. Now, where have you heard this before? Have you heard this before? It's hidden within the legislation, within the verbiage of the bill. The proposals, of course, are by far the worst that any organization, any group of politicians, politicos have come up with ever. The Gang of Eight, which includes people such as Lindsey Graham, John McCain, Chuck Schumer, and so on. They're working with Obama. Let me say that again. They're working with Obama to sneak in a national identification number or even a biometric type of chip into this national ID, into this immigration reform bill. And this would create or cause the creation of a federal database, once again, with biometric information on all citizens, anyone working here within the United States. And you could see where this is going, ladies and gentlemen. In a very short time, it would be illegal for anyone to have a job without an ID card. Of course, that's the whole point. So a social security number is not good enough. you've got to have a national ID card with biometric information. And then every time you would apply for a job, the government will know. And how soon will it be then from that point when, well, it's going to be required for purchases? You see where we're going with this? The government will know ultimately what you eat, where you eat. If you're eating healthy, they're going to know. If you go to buy a pack of cigarettes, they're going to know. If you go to buy a fifth of bourbon, they're going to know what you read. They're going to know everything about you. And once they know this information, not only are they going to regulate everything, but they're going to be able to put you in certain classifications. Amnesty is just the cover for what's coming, folks. Please pay very close attention to this immigration reform.
All right, we're going to go to a clip that we wanted to play last night because we do have a bunch of news on from some stories from the New American, others from one from the Right Scoop. We have also even one from this is a Constitution, mhconstitution.com, about a North Carolina's pastor who is raided by Homeland Security. We have stories about the religious conservative leaders who are speaking out now against Mickey Weinstein, who was the guy consulting the Pentagon on the religious policy, who called Christians vile, monstrous, basically, and equated the teaching and preaching of the gospel to spiritual rape. Bill O'Reilly had this guy on his show with this Mark Weinstein. And
Mickey Weinstein.
Mickey Weinstein, I'm sorry.
Or Weinstein, depending on which side of the river you're from.
Now, we read the articles on air and explained how they demonized Christianity, basically saying that it was abusive to the soldiers. Just completely outrageous statements. The most outrageous statements you could make, pretty much. And then I watched this interview Bill O'Reilly did with him. And something was not right. Yeah. I'm going to play this, and we're going to break this down on the other side, because there's something very wrong here.
Next segment tonight, there's an organization called the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, run by a man named Mikey Weinstein, a Republican who worked in the Reagan administration. Mr. Weinstein wants to hold military officers responsible for perceived religious proselytizing. I got it, proselytizing. Writing in the Huffington Post, Weinstein says, quote, "We face incredibly well-funded gangs of fundamentalist Christian monsters who terrorize their fellow Americans by forcing their weaponized and twisted version of Christianity upon their helpless subordinates in our nation's armed forces. We must vigorously support the continuing efforts to expose pathologically anti-gay, Islamophobic, and rabidly intolerant agitators for what they are, die-hard enemies of the United States Constitution," unquote. Joining us now from Albuquerque, New Mexico, is Mr. Weinstein. All right, I want to get very specific here. Do you believe that an officer in the military who opposes openly gay individuals serving, is that officer homophobic?
Well, I think having any particular viewpoint at all, Bill, is perfectly fine. There's a difference between what you personally feel inside and then the behavior that you exhibit. If you are showing any sort of derision or any sort of oppression or tyranny on a member who's openly gay in the military, well, then you are clearly in violation of the Constitution as well as regulations.
But you don't brand anyone for a sincerely held belief that it would be better for military order if gays just served as they used to in a don't ask, don't tell situation. You wouldn't say, even though you disagree with it, that officer would be homophobic automatically.
Absolutely not.
Okay,
all we care about it, we're a hamburger, not a complex meal like Chateaubriand. It's your behavior and your attitude that matters. What you have inside belongs to you.
We assume that the military code of justice will take care of people who violate military law. Let's get on to the...
Not a good assumption, Bill. Not a good assumption.
No, so you think the military is corrupt in that regard, Mr. Weinstein?
I do. I think, and I've been doing this for 9 years, 2 months, and 28 days. And we represent over 33,000 members of the U.S. military, 96% of them Catholics, like you, and Roman Catholics and Protestants who are victims of religious oppression. So this is something that we view as totally out of control, and this is why we've been fighting
so
so
you
long.
believe, you flat out, and I know that you talked to some Pentagon officials, they sought you out for a discussion. You believe that the military, the American military, is corrupt, that it isn't enforcing protections against, let's say, overzealous proselytizing. You believe that is not happening now.
I completely agree with your statement. It is not happening. And
that's not my statement. I think that's your statement. Okay.
Yes.
Because I don't know.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, that's what you believe. All right. Let's get the Islamophobic thing in here now. Would you say in the war on terror that militant Islam is our primary enemy?
I would say that absolutely. Salafi Wahhabist Islam, which is a small subsection of Islam itself. Not every Muslim, including fetuses inside a Muslim woman's womb, are terrorists, but our enemy is extremist fundamentalist Islam.
Jihadist.
Absolutely, no doubt.
All right. Okay.
Yes,
so you concur with
Correct.
that. And so therefore that our military's efforts have to be directed in that arena, with a jihadist.
Bill, I wanted to say something.
Go.
What I wanted to say is that we should be fighting as an American military our national interests, but we should not look like Christian crusaders to the people we're fighting. When we do that,
can you give me an example of how in the past?
Yes.
All right, give me an example of how we look like Christian crusaders.
2.5 years ago, we broke the story of the so-called Jesus rifles. Every rifle that we had in the U.S. military had inscribed on its scope New Testament biblical citations. We had over 136 U.S. Marines that came to us saying it was horrible for them in Afghanistan.
What was the
dealing
inscription?
with it. They were from the book of John, I think Mark, and there was one from Revelation. It came from a defense contractor called Trigicon that had almost a $2 billion contract. I forget the exact citation. Something about the light of the world, and but it was the fact that it was the actual citation. They didn't have room to put the entire word down.
Right, but I mean, with that important, Mr. Weinstein, with all due respect, why would you have forgotten? I mean, that seems to me a fairly
Bill. Let me try to respond here.
All right.
Obviously, the military grew this within a couple 3 days. They agreed that this was terribly wrong. It turned out that our NATO allies have these, even the Israeli Defense Forces.
So it was one rifle maker that did it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying you should be able to tell me what the offending passage was. All right, final question for you.
Bill.
Yeah.
We have. Let me put it this way. I can give you lots of different verses that are out there. The bottom line is that this was well covered in the media.
The real bottom line.
The military made the change.
The real bottom line is the military took care of it. That's the real bottom line. Final question.
Did after we went and had to stand up and fight on behalf of our clients, they finally did. But without us, they would not have.
All right. Now, final question. The Obama administration, very secular administration. Are you still saying that the military is corrupt, or hasn't the Obama administration, after 5 years, wiped all this out?
This is not an indictment on any member of the of the White House. Obviously, whether it was George W. Bush or his predecessor or Obama, they're the commander in chief. We are seeing things that are better clearly under Obama. You say secular like it's a bad thing. From our perspective,
I didn't say it was a bad thing. It was just a statement, Mr. Weinstein. You got to be able to come on. I said it's a secular administration.
Yes, I would say that I say that very proudly. That means that everybody gets equal rights. This is the no spin zone, and that's why we support it.
Listen, if everybody got equal rights in a secular society, I would applaud it. Of course, that's not true. We don't live in a perfect world, and secularism brings its own problems. Mr. Weinstein, we appreciate you being a stand-up guy and coming on in. Very interesting.
Stand-up guy, right?
Yeah, just like a rally.
Yeah. Okay, folks. One of the reasons this was played for you is because this is what the American media has been reduced to, and I say that deliberately reduced to. You've got a mutual public display of affection between O'Reilly and Weinstein. And
O'Reilly, the supposed, the biggest ratings guy at Fox, the Christian conservative station for the U.S. and for freedom across the world.
No spin is just spun out of control. The fact that look,
it's like he was interviewing his uncle,
and the argument was so displaced. It had little to do with the core issue, and the core issue is the attack on Christianity. But dare O'Reilly even bring up the attack on Christianity? This does circle back to what we were talking about during the first hour, and that is what was taking place with our fallen seals. Okay, this is how this all connects. You've got to understand what's going on. You've got to really understand how this is tied together. There
is a Coast Guard Rear Admiral who says now the religious liberty is under threat in the military. This is a really powerful speech by Coast Guard Rear Admiral William Lee, who says religious liberty is under threat in the military. Thursday at the National Day of Prayer event on Capitol Hill, Admiral William Lee spoke out against the growing religious hostility in the military, as reported by World Magazine. The Admiral recounted a story of his decision to violate military rules preventing him from giving a Bible to a soldier who had attempted suicide. The Admiral said, the lawyers tell me that if I do that, I'm crossing the line. Right. I'm so glad I've crossed that line so many times. Lee pledged not to back down from his right under the Constitution to tell a young man that there is hope. According to World Magazine, he asked those gathered to pray for military service members as they weather the storm that I am almost certain will come. And that is the storm of the outlawing of Christianity in the military.
Well, right. I mean, you've got the, even flowing into this, you've got the National Day of Prayer event at Capitol Hill. The growing animosity toward Christianity is just but one line or one field of battle that we're fighting right now. And you're right, the Family Research Council, the Admiral, the Rear Admiral William Lee, you're right about all of this. You're right about him. I mean, my goodness, I'm crossing the line. I'm so glad I've crossed that line so many times. But once again, what's going on with the Navy SEAL team that was killed back in 2011? Well, you've got this imam who has reportedly, and it depends on who you ask. Once again, there are other people trying to soft sell this or soft pedal this when it shouldn't be.
Yeah, Bill O'Reilly on that clip basically gave this anti-Christian, anti-God person a free pass, a promotion. Did not challenge him, aside from not knowing a Bible verse that was inscribed on the scope of rifles.
Well, there were several.
That was important that he knew he didn't know. No, what was important is what he was doing by telling the Pentagon or consulting the Pentagon on how to handle religion in the military. But not only that, when you have a gentleman, or no, I shouldn't say gentleman, when you have a heathen who comes out and says that preaching the gospel is the same as spiritual rape. And I understand we need to love our enemies, we need to be respectful and polite, but there's a difference between being respectful and polite and laying down, or you can still be respectful and polite and make your point and stand up for what's right. And it seemed like Bill O'Reilly was doing nothing more than staying in the gray area.
And for those, and by the way, just for those of you who think this Weinstein's intent is innocuous, and of course standing up for this very much misunderstood separation of church and state, don't forget this attorney activist, Mickey Weinstein, the president of this Military Religious Freedom Foundation. had admitted just a couple of days ago that he's considering filing a lawsuit against Michelle Bachmann over a recent fundraising email that he claims spread complete and utter lies about him. And once again, this is the tactic being used by those who want to kill our freedoms. And for those of you who don't know, by the way, I had sent this email, or I sent this out today. You talk about talking bad, for example, or questioning motives. It was 5 years ago, or I'm sorry, now it was closer to 7 years ago that I had a religious statement issued against me by none other than Sheikh Mubarak Ali Jalani of the Muslims of Americas, claiming, of course, he claimed that I was attempting to incite a war between the Muslims and Christians. And how this all works is they use litigation to stop your freedom of speech, but this Mickey Weinstein said, well, I'm going to sue Michelle Bachmann because she's suggesting that troops couldn't practice their own religion. Well, this is technically correct, but under the threat of litigation, this is what we're seeing more and more. And now you've got the ground zero being the military, U.S. military. You've got the U.S. military being, well, what are they doing there? They're the influx of homosexuals, the repealing of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I don't even know how to describe that whole process, except to say that it's a perversion, and it's intentional to take down our military, to weaken our military from within. And then you've got the threat of litigation by these various organizations whose roots have grown over the last 5 years, and not only grown, but aligned themselves with some pretty interesting bedfellows, including but not limited to places like the Council on American and Islamic Relations. So what we've got is this marriage, this unity between these Christian, these secular organizations with Islam to pile up against Jews and Christians. And one of the battlefields is the military. The other battlefield is the talk circuit, the people who dare open their mouths, as we will constantly, under the threat of litigation. So this is a pretty complex argument. You've got to understand how complex this is. It's not anything near what O'Reilly portrayed it to be in his 4-minute discourse with Mickey Weinstein. You just can't have this conversation in a 4-minute talking points. It leaves the wrong impression. And it goes back to what you opened with too, about the people seek the knowledge, and they're treated to these sound bites, and they're misrepresented. So I mean, all of this ties together. It's absolutely incredible when you look at the big picture. But I would urge everyone to look at the big picture. And I don't know, Joe. I don't know what else to say about that, except to say that the synagogue of Satan is spreading. The smoke of Satan is spreading into our military, into all aspects of our government.
Well, I know the military.
That's it. No, go ahead.
I know the military is not allowed to listen to this broadcast in some places, as you stated, but I would urge everyone, obviously those people probably already know this, but you remain bold in your faith, you remain strong in your faith, and do not waver. We can have everything taken away from us except our souls. And we were warned that don't fear those who can take your body, the life from your body away. Fear those who can take your soul away. And there are so many out there now, as the deceptions are so complex and are woven and easy to fall into with the abilities and technologies we have available to us today. Switching gears here, going to the Department of Justice. Today, or I'm sorry, yesterday, an article came out. We don't need warrants for email or Facebook chats. An FBI investigation manual updated last year, obtained by the ACLU, says it's possible to warrantlessly obtain Americans' email without running afoul of the Fourth Amendment. The U.S. Department of Justice and FBI believe they don't need search warrants to review Americans' emails, Facebook chats, Twitter direct messages, and other private files and internal documents. Now, we're not talking about reading your Facebook posts that you make public or the Twitter messages people put out. They specifically say Facebook chats, Twitter direct messages. And this is nothing new. They're probably have been doing this since Twitter and Facebook. It was probably built into their systems to make it easier for them to monitor and read this stuff. But we are seeing this public push to do away with any type of privacy rights. People who are videotaping cops with cameras on the streets are being arrested. People are being monitored without warrants. You can pretty much, the FBI, any government agency under the guise of suspected terrorism is how they do this, and they can walk into your house. And you told me stories, Dad, before about the searches they do in your house when you leave with people without warrants. What are they called?
Sneak and peeks.
Sneak and peeks. Yeah. Now those are done without warrants.
Well, those were always actually. Well, I shouldn't say always done without warrants, but there was a limited ability for the federal authorities or for state authorities to come in, law enforcement authorities in general, come into your house to see if there was something there to warrant a search warrant, which at its face is certainly a violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah,
and this is what we're seeing. I mean,
yep, and this article is pertaining to the Department of Justice, but in researching this article, I found a lot more information that it's not just the Department of Justice. The FBI has this policy that is similar, and now the IRS last month issued their warrantless email access policy, and it's a PDF out there that you can find, but the IRS said that the policy would be changed for the email, but never went back to fix it. But they have also the ability to access all of your internet messages, private messages, without warrants. So you have the IRS, the EPA, the FBI, the DOJ, and I could just keep saying initials. And
it's really crazy. Look, I want to say this. Back in March, a California court had criticized the FBI for violating the First Amendment rights by using the so-called national security letters. You've heard about those, folks. By citing national security considerations, the FBI could bypass getting warrants in the traditional sense. The subject of investigations would not be informed that their data had been shared. Just picture this. You're using a computer, you're storing your information, we'll say, using Gmail, the Dropbox, the messages behind Facebook, not your public postings, as you pointed out, Twitter, whatever. It's as if think of it this way. The government, if they were to search for, let's say, written documentation, paper documentation in your home, they would need a warrant. If they were to search your hard drive on your computer, they would need a warrant. Yet their argument here, and perhaps this would be better clarification, now that what they're saying, the Department of Justice is saying, is we don't need a warrant to search, for example, Gmail, Dropbox, or other virtual information storage areas like cloud services. Really now. So the Fourth Amendment rights is what's at issue here. And digital content versus hard copy content, well, that's treated differently. And but the end result here is that the entirety of our Fourth Amendment rights are being the search and seizure Have been. That's correct. And you know what, though? This is this not an extension of what we have seen at the airports? People say, well, really, what does it matter? It's a little bit of an inconvenience at airports when you have to go through the detectors and you get groped by these TSA goons. It's just a matter of, what does it matter? Kind of like Hillary Clinton. Maybe I should. What difference does it make, right? Well, once again, this all ties together because this is a natural extension of that procedure. You are being violated from every angle imaginable. And people, you've got to understand this. This is a violation of our constitutional rights. It didn't start under Obama. It certainly accelerated under Obama, in particular with his advisors, all of which are Marxist advisors at the very least. Admittedly. Chairman Mao, people who adore Mao Zedong, like Anita Dunn and others. And I'm not trying to spread hyperbole here. It's a fact. So what do we have? We have this erosion of rights under the illusion of security, under the illusion of protection, when in fact we have a violation and, as I said, an erosion of our own rights. And we will be, by the way, this does, and it goes back to what we said about Benghazi and Syria. This is all for a greater agenda. You see, there will be, and we are launching, folks, a fourth hour program called Dayside. When I say fourth hour, it's going to be separate from our normal program, but it's going to have to do with it'll probably be like from 11:15 to 12:15 or 11:30 to 12:30 Eastern time at night. But the fact of the matter is, it's going to be daylight in the areas where we're talking about. So we're going to have the news before anyone else, reporting in real time, just strictly news, information, actionable information that you can use. We're going to be launching that here in the short term. We're working on the logistics of it right now. But the fact is, all of this ties together, and it ties together what's going to happen and what has happened. And don't forget, we started off this program talking about what happened with the SEALs, the press conference today, the Navy SEAL Team 6 families. That's how we started off talking, and we talked about the imam there, but the other components of that too. Why and how high-level military officials sent these Navy SEAL Team 6 heroes into battle without any special operation, aviation, proper air support. How did, exactly how did what happened? Was there a breach of information? There most certainly was. By whom? Well, by the very people who have infiltrated our military, our government, from the inside. And of course, you've got leadership in this country identifying people, high-value targets. SEAL Team 6, a very high-value target for the people are enemies, sending them out to the wolves. All of this. It's beyond connect the dot time at this point. Now we're filling in now we're coloring in the various parts to the puzzle. And as we do this, people just simply are approaching this with a very an abundant amount of laziness, I believe, or lack of understanding. I don't know which.
It's a bit of both, I'd say. And we see Christianity under assault. We see the society changing in a way that is so radically different from what it once was. And change isn't always bad, but when the change is from evil to more evil, yes, that is not acceptable. And the religious, the Mickey Weinstein, and from his Pentagon consultation that led to all the articles and remarks to the psychiatry guy The new psychiatry guide has finally been released, the
Yes.
DSM-5. The new edition of the so-called Bible of Mental Disorders. The federal government's most prominent psychiatric expert said the book suffers from a scientific lack of validity. And we're going to be talking about that as the New York Times.
This is important.
Yes.
Wow.
As their DSM manuals diagnose and statistical manuals of mental disorders, they are the best tool available for treating patients and should not be tossed out, he said. It does not reflect the complexity of many disorders, and it's a way of categorizing mental illness. It should not guide research. But interestingly enough, DSM-5, as well as DSM-4, has new sections focused on spirituality, saying that your belief in a deity could be related to some kind of schizophrenic or what else do they say? Bipolar type disorder. And this is important because this is basically, like the guy says, the Bible for psychiatry, as they look at this as their blueprint on diagnosing new things, and as science and research continue to grow and scientists learn new things. Well, this is what they're doing, and this is a incremental. We see all fronts. The religion is under attack, whether it be with Obamacare and forcing them to pay for birth control. The Lord gave us free will. We're not getting free will, even though we live in a free society, allegedly. This is being forced on us.
Well, with the intent, by the way, folks, and people have to understand, the intent is, the ultimate game plan here is to force out any type of worship of the one true God, and replace that worship the Judeo-Christian foundation of this country, and of course our ability to worship, to replace it with a state-run religion, if you will, using Islam as a tool, because Islam is more a political ideology disguised as a religion. And this is how they're going to do it. So you've got co-conspirators like the Council on American Islamic Relations, who I know occasionally tunes into this show. And if you do so tonight, make sure your tape recorders are running, because certainly to the Council on American Islamic Relations, you are, in fact, in my personal view, a co-conspirator of terrorism in this country, and have done more to destroy the moral and Christian fabric of this country than any other organization, aside from our own politicians. Now, that aside, the goal, once again, is to take the state, elevate it to the worship status, and destroy the Judeo-Christian principles that we have and hold dear to us. We're going to be forced into worshiping our God into the basements of homes. That's where we're headed.
Let me ask you, I'm going to give you multiple choice questions. Which of the following has happened in America?
Blue, purple.
1, a man was fired for displaying Bible verses in his workspace. 2, a judge ordered a mother not to teach her daughter anything that could be considered homophobic. 3, high school students are trained to roam the halls in search of verbal offenses to report to law enforcement or law officials. 4, a pastor faces prison sentence for reading from the Bible. 5, all of the above.
What was the question?
Which one of these were true? Which one of these actually happened in America? Yeah, you're right. All of the above.
Yeah.
Yes. So you can see it is not just schools. It is not just, it is everywhere. It's churches. It's on every front. And now we see Republicans refusing to appoint members to Obamacare's most notorious panel. You know what the panel is? The death panels. One of the most politically intensive fights over the Affordable Health Care Act was over the creation of the Independent Payment Advisory Board, infamously dubbed Death Panel.
There's no death panels. Come on, that's a conspiracy theory.
Okay. Well, anyway, on Thursday, Republican Speaker John Boehner and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell signaled that they would keep working to keep opposition alive by doing everything they can to impede the board's implementation. Good luck with that. The two leaders wrote a letter to Obama notifying him that they would not be submitting any recommendations to the panel because of their opposition to it and to the law in general. Here's the relevant part of the letter. They're explaining why they're not offering any recommendations. Basically, they go on to say that the unfortunate result is that decisions which impact American seniors will be made in the absence of the democratic process, without the system of checks and balances that would normally apply to important matters of public policy. Yet your recent budget called for the expanding of these death panels and tasking it with making even larger cuts to Medicare than those called for in the health law. Even the trustees of the Medicare program have told us that the death care providers cuts would be difficult to achieve in practice because of the denied care that seniors would experience. Anyway, back to the article. McConnell and Boehner's letter has no impact on the ground, according to Hoffman. He told this to the Business Insider. It's a protest move. We're not going to cooperate with what the law says in this regard. He's saying that tongue-in-cheek, trying to be sarcastic, and this again turned into a political issue of left-right issue, when this is one of the most serious issues with Obamacare, because if somebody else is going to decide if you have enough value as a human to be kept alive or not, I mean, that's
exactly.
Just saying that out loud. If I get sick, I get to go in front of basically a tribunal, and they can tell me if I'm worth saving.
Well, I'm going to ask the break to be held here because I just want to say this real quick. Back in January, this story came out, and I couldn't believe it, and I had to verify it, and of course I did. But the critics of Obamacare warned about death panels like you're talking about today, Joe. The government, of course, dismissed all such talk as scaremongering. There'll never be anything as death panels. You've got the word of the government. Well, let's take a look at just one mother, and this happened on January 10th, 2012, last year in the conference room in the nephrology department at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. This couple, this mother, arrived for their regular nephrology visit with Amelia's doctor, who has seen her for the last 3 years. She examines Amelia and sends us for labs. This, according to this mother narrating this. I ask about the transplant, and she says we have about 6 months to a year until she needs one. Of course, this young girl needs a transplant. She tells us that she reserved she tells us she reserved the conference room, and when we get back from the lab work, we can meet with the transplant team, and they can tell us all about the transplant process. Well, anyway, after the lab work was done, the little girl fell asleep in her stroller, Amelia, and her and her mother were called back into this large conference room with a screen and about 16 chairs. Now, the mother and her husband and the little girl, they went into this room, and after about 5 minutes, a doctor and social worker entered the room. They sat across from this couple, but they left a space between the two of them. The doctor at that point began to talk, and he was a Peruvian, had a Peruvian accent, very small brown hair, mustache. He's about 65 years old. He gets about 4 sentences out, according to this mother, and places 2 pieces of paper on the table. The woman says, I can't take my eyes off the paper. I'm afraid to look over at my husband because suddenly I know where the conversation is headed. You see, in the middle of both papers, he highlighted in pink 2 phrases. Page 1 had the words mentally retarded in this pink, I don't know, this pink highlighted, if you will, under hepatitis C paper that had the phrase brain damage in the same pink highlighted right under HIV. Anyway, he gets out about 3 more sentences, and this woman just something just happened, in her brain. At first, it was hazy, foggy, like she was swimming underwater. Then she shook her head a little bit to clear it, and she began to focus on what he just said. She said, "Wait a minute, stop talking for a second. Did you just say Amelia shouldn't have the transplant done because she's mentally retarded? I'm confused. Did you really just say that?" Well, of course, that's what he said. He's a member of a death panel. You see, the death panel, this panel is really not a death panel, but the panel gave them a thumbs down on any transplant for this little girl. Why? Because her IQ might not be what they would consider normal. So think about that, folks. That's how these death panels are. And I wanted to just kind of slide that in before the break because I thought that was so troubling, so important that this is taking place today. This is taking place today.
Yep. And we're going to go to the break right now. When we come back, we're going to take your phone calls and hit a few more stories. First and foremost, on the other side, should parents be forced to vaccinate their children? This is a question that is being seriously asked, and there has already been history in America in some states where the government has forced children to take vaccinations, and they pretty much do it on an everyday basis because people do not know their rights. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report this Thursday, May 9th, 2013. Stay right with us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, folks. Doug Hagmann here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eilena Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world.
If you love pineapple as much as I do, I've got some great news for you. You're going to love this offer from Freeze Dry Guy. For the month of May, Freeze Dry Guy is offering the finest quality freeze-dried pineapple, a case of 6 number 10 cans yielding 114 servings at a special introductory price. First quality freeze-dried pineapple grown and packed with nothing added. This healthy treat works wonders with salad. It's great for snacking, hiking, hunting, camping, and for adding to your food storage program. And please note that Freeze Dry Guy's foods will store on your shelf for decades. Order now and get free shipping to your front door within the lower 48 states. This special introductory price is good until May 31st. For more information and a free complete product list, go to freezedryguy.com or phone 866-404-3663. freezedryguy.com 866-404-3663.
You want answers? I'll get them. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 3, the third and final hour of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Heard live weekdays, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This third hour, we will be taking your phone calls at 661-244-9839. 2 quick stories we're going to hit here. First, 1, radioactive water was released into Lake Michigan before the nuclear plant shut down on Sunday. I'll post an article in the chat here as 79 gallons of diluted radioactive water released into Lake Michigan, this according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on May 6th. But by the time the water reached the lake, the level of radioactivity had been diluted to the point where it was not a risk or a public or health risk, according to a spokeswoman from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Huh. I went wading in Lake Michigan and felt like I got a sunburn on my legs. Now, what's that all about?
If radioactivity is so easily diluted and made undangerous just by dumping it in water, I mean, why not just dump everything from Fukushima into the water? Why not put the nuclear waste in the oceans? Since it dilutes it and it's not harmful then, right? It's not a risk.
Oh, yeah. The fish with tumors, really, you're just mistaken, and you're being hypersensitive to you're being too hypersensitive when you point out the tumors, fish, and the blowback from this radioactivity. Look, I believe I believe in nuclear energy, but responsible nuclear energy. But there are other ways. The solar certainly is not the way, and wind is not the way. But frankly, if you come right down to it, and this is a discussion for another show, folks, do you believe? I'll put this as a question to the listeners. Do you believe that perhaps the government is actually hiding free energy or energy that would be much less harmful to the people, just because proven. It's right? Well, again, that's a topic for another program. But I think that all in the name of greed and money, this is what's taking place. But
yeah, and you're right, and that's exactly it. It's the greed of people. It is the love of money, the love of that control. But this is frustrating, the way they word this article. It says this weekend's unplanned event of the leak.
So that means
they mentioned, they had to mention that it was not planned. They did not plan to dump the radioactive water into Lake Michigan. Occurred after a leak in the safety injection refueling water tank increased from 1 gallon a day on Thursday to 90 gallons either Friday night or Saturday night. They don't keep track that close, so they don't know, apparently.
Hey, try dumping something from your business into the storm sewers.
Yeah, try to dump a old pan of oil somewhere, and
they will chase that down.
Arrested.
Oh yeah, they'll chase that down to the source, and then they come after you with both barrels, the EPA. But of course, this, whoops.
Yeah, and make a long story short, this nuclear power plant is still shut down, and the plant was shut down 1:12 a.m. Sunday, and the tank that leaked was rendered inoperable. The nuclear plant was offline Monday, and the tank will be drained to determine the location of the leak. But anyway, we see the same narrative when radioactivity releases, whether from Fukushima to wherever. It gets diluted. It won't affect you all the way over here, even though it has a half-life, 20,000 plus years.
Well,
anyway.
In addition to that, too, if you look at our nuclear power plants all across the country, exactly what states of disrepair are they in? We know that in Pennsylvania, for example, the Peach Bottom nuclear power plant, especially back in the late 80s, had some issues. And I was involved in the inside portion of a gentleman who was running for the PUC, to be nominated for the PUC. And he would have been the deciding vote against the continuation of operation of the Peach Bottom nuclear power plant. Well, what the power company did was they hired a hit squad, a professional hit squad, if you will, that unfortunately I was a part of unwittingly at the time to make sure that his nomination never saw the light of day. Not that I ever pay for that. I had, as an investigator, after doing the background investigation, and by no means, I will say this, the information that I submitted to my client, who was identified ultimately as the power company, this man had some problems with his background. Now, having said that, what my client did was leak my report to the Senate floor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania the night before Thanksgiving back in 1987. And the governor at that time, Governor Bob Casey, took out all the stops because what they did was they cut off the header, the header of the paper, of the report, so they couldn't tell who issued the report. So it was this anonymous report. So the governor made it his Christmas wish to find out who actually authored the report. So if you can just imagine this, and I digress a little bit, but sometimes a war story might not be the worst thing to say. I'm watching television in my office on the night before Thanksgiving in 1987, watching the news at 11 o'clock, and hear the announcement of the PUC nominee, his resignation from consideration. And then the next clip shows the governor saying, whoever released this report, we're going to find out who it is, and we're going to make him pay. And I'm paraphrasing and thinking to myself, boy, this is going to be this is not going to work out too well for me, for our company. And for the next, we were able to actually not be identified for, I think it was a good month or so. But once the dam broke open, we had to open up our offices to every state agency known to man. And we were audited for, I think it was 8 months, a continuous audit by various agencies for 8 months. But see, that's the political games. Those are the political games being played today, except the stakes are much higher on all ends of the spectrum. Just thought I'd share that with you.
Should parents be forced to vaccinate their children? We're going to play a quick clip. But by the age of 2, children in America receive an average of 26 vaccinations. And most parents agree that it is a vital step in keeping their kids healthy. But let's listen to this clip.
Well, it's hard to see your child in pain, but for many parents, keeping up to date on vaccinations is considered by some in society a necessary obligation to keeping their kids healthy. And that means a lot of shots. On average, American children now receive 26 vaccinations by the age of 2. That is unless parents exercise their decision to opt out. Now, Oregon now leads the country in the number of parents who choose to exempt their kindergartners from school-required vaccinations. And for most of the U.S., parents do not have the right to make that decision for their children for religious or medical reasons. But last month, the Oregon State Court of Appeals ruled that the state would be better equipped to make the decisions other than the parents and 8 Marion County children. Now, the court ruled that the parents who had lost custody of their children a year prior due to unspecified reasons did not have the legal right to exempt their children from required immunizations for religious reasons. Now, vaccine refusers are seen by some as threatening public health, but just what rights do parents have who may be opposed to vaccines due to their unknown risk when it comes to making medical decisions for their children? And when should the state step in? Well, with me to discuss this in depth, I'm joined by Dr. Sujatha Reddy from Atlanta. Hello, Dr. Reddy.
Hello there.
So what is the line? Where's the line drawn for parents and their ability to exercise their discretion about what type of medical care is imposed on their child?
Well, I think, the parents obviously have the last say in virtually everything, but when we look at vaccines that are known to save lives, I think here it's pretty much a no-brainer that vaccines are helpful. And if you ever have met anyone or know someone in a third world country who saw someone die or get very ill from a preventable disease, they will tell you how important and lucky we are to be able to get vaccines universally in the U.S.
Well, that's certainly an excellent point. What does the law have to say, about parents who want to opt out? Is there anything on the books?
Well, in some states there are some laws that allow parents to opt out, but you will see, we actually have seen in medicine trends of, children dying of things like whooping cough or pertussis in states where parents have opted out. And I can only imagine if you're the parent of that child, how bad that must feel if you've not vaccinated your child and they can contract whooping cough and die from it, how terrible that must feel. But there are some states where parents can do that. But what we're starting to see is when you don't vaccinate, you lack herd immunity, and so we're going to start seeing children, who even though they got vaccinated are going to be exposed to things and may get ill because these other children aren't vaccinated, and that's very concerning.
Do you think that parents just aren't informed on the benefits of vaccines, or are these parents who are refusing to immunize, do they have a legitimate fear that it can threaten their child's health?
Well, I have to think that anyone that doesn't vaccinate their child is thinking they're doing the best thing for their child, but I have to think that that's not based on fact. there was some concern about side effects of vaccines and things like autism, but all that has been really disproven over and over and over again. And, medically, there is no question that the benefit of vaccines, outweigh the small risks.
Okay. Talk to me about the public health concerns when it comes to parents who don't vaccinate.
Well, it's kind of like I was saying before, that whole concept of herd immunity. We've almost eradicated a lot of childhood diseases in the U.S. because we have such a high penetration or a high percent of people who get vaccinated. And if you start losing that, we're going to start seeing outbreaks like we've seen in California.
Okay, I'm cutting that short. A few things. Vaccinations are not required. It is not mandatory. It is not law. There is no opting out because, well, I guess you could say there is opting out because people do not know the law. But if people knew the law, there is no opting out. This goes to, remember Melissa? You're muted. Remember Melissa Harris Perry?
Yes, I am.
Talking about you need to start thinking of your children as part of the collective. Parents need to let go of the idea that children are theirs. Well, we see this here with vaccinations. The lady said, yes, parents have the ultimate authority over everything their children ingest or care they get, but they need to get vaccinated. I don't know if you guys ever saw the clip when MSNBC Morning Joe was talking about those vaccinations. I think this was during the last presidential primary, and they were talking about Rick Perry, and the lady says, listen to the government, get your shot. That mentality, that attitude. Why? And they go back and talk about the third world nations that are so fortunate to get vaccines. Well, how many of the third world nations had dozens and hundreds of people that were killed just because they took the vaccinations? We don't even know. The vaccinations have been through a very prominent French publication, scientific publication, linking vaccinations to autism. It is not necessarily the component that is used to immunize you. It is the additives they put in the vaccinations that are harmful, along with the poisons that are already in the water and in the air, in the food that we ingest. And do we see a rise in autism? Do we see a rise in Alzheimer's? Do we see a rise in all of we're talking not a small rise. We're talking, what was it? I think 20 years ago, it was 1 in 100,000 kids to 1 in 10 kids to 1 in...
Right. And we could point out so many issues with vaccines, but I think the important thing is for especially for new listeners to really understand is if you look at the Georgia Guidestones that were erected back, when was that? Back in the late 70s.
It was 30 years ago on March 22nd, 1980.
Okay. 1980. All right. Well,
33,
83. Or 30, right? It was exactly the clear consensus among the globalist elite that overpopulation is the primary cause of, the problems that the world is facing, and people have got to understand what that. Really, what that vaccinations are a part of this. To call the overpopulation, the elite know this. They're the plague on earth. It's people are a plague on earth. That's their mentality. And CNN founder Ted Turner says the world population of 250 to 300 million people, or 95%, a 95% decline from present levels would be ideal. Okay. So this is all about vaccinations, the slow kill, as Alex Jones puts it, the slow kill. So,
we're going to go to the phones, but just quick from
one more thing too, Joe. I want to just say this, and I want to know how from people too, if you've experienced this. A lot of doctors are refusing to treat their people's children, out of concern because. For example, people are fed up with parents who refuse to vaccinate their children out of concern that it can cause autism or other problems.
Dr. Oz, classic example. YouTube Dr. Oz says he'll say no to vaccinations. He goes on TV, tells the people that they should get their kids vaccinated. It's important. it's something they need. And then he's asked, would he do it give it to his kids? And he says no.
Oh, of
That should
course
tell
not.
you all you need to know right there. And I'm not saying vaccines in whole are bad, but now in the current system, with the current people running the system we live in, I would take nothing they give me, and especially something they want to force inside me. You got another thing coming, because I'm not going to willfully go along with it.
Right.
Who knows what dangers there are in those vaccines, and until more scientific studies come out, we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, you have a right to say no. Should parents get vaccinations, certain vaccinations? You got to do a lot of research to figure out what is important. But anyway, sorry for delaying the calls. We're gonna go to the phones. 626 area code. We're coming to you first. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Doug and Joe Hagmann, God's blessings and protection on you both in this D+8 of the war on Christianity, gentlemen.
That's a very good war on Christianity. Thank you for saying that.
Well, you're absolutely welcome, Doug. And I want to mention quickly, I have a quick report to offer to you. As you know, I like to walk the streets of Pasadena here when I join the Hagmann and Hagmann family. And I've been caught in an absolute deluge. We have a thunderstorm going on that just started. So if you do hear a rumbling or a boom, we are having some significant thunder. So I just wanted to mention that quickly. And I'll go ahead and get to the reason I called. Gentlemen, I want to commend you both on the coverage on Benghazi. It's difficult to absorb it daily. Doug, your articles have been concise, they've been insightful, and they've been heartbreaking. And I am calling tonight because I want to shed some light on an overlooked story regarding Benghazi. And I'm referring to United States 17-year Air Force veteran, Airman Sean Smith. He was one of the 4 slaughtered on September 11th, 2012. And I was privileged to hear his mom speak a couple of weeks ago on a national news talk program.
Patricia
and it
Smith.
was her words, and correct, yes, Patricia Smith, exactly. And I just wanted to quickly inform the Hagmann and Hagmann family on what I learned. And in so doing, folks, I want everyone to imagine for a moment Sean's MOS, his duties in the Air Force. He was an IT guy. He was a computer person. So he was trained in basic training, but he was not a hands-on frontline warrior per se. But nonetheless, he was one of 4 who fought in an Alamo-like scenario for many, many hours of small arms, close combat with the ambassador of the United States, Chris Stevens, and 2 former Navy SEALs, personnel who are trained, the SEALs anyway, to deal with these type of contingencies. Doug and Joe, before Sean was murdered, he sent, I would assume it was an email, the way his mother, Mrs. Smith, worded it, she said, he sent to me on his little typewriter thing a message that said, Mom, we need more security here. We need help. Mrs. Smith then went on to say, Sean was 34 years old. I did the best I could to raise him and nourish him for the first 17 years of his life. The Air Force had him for the last 17, and they did not do likewise. So the story of Mrs. Smith, it absolutely is. And gentlemen, again, I appreciate you giving me the moment here to share this, but also it's cathartic for me. I've been praying about this, and I've been really just emotionally overwhelmed by it since I heard her on the Hannity show. And of course, I've heard Susan Price. I think I've heard her every time she's joined the Hagmann family and shared with us, her trials and experiences. Similarly to Susan Price, Mrs. Smith has come under attack via social networking, Facebook, Twitter, but because we are believers, and in the spirit of the show, I'm going to refrain from going into verbatim the type of persecution that she's been undergoing. And what I'll do instead is I'll just share quickly her reminiscence of her son's funeral. Along with a gaggle of drive-by media, all of the national political dignitaries were present, including Barack Hussein Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and Leon Panetta. Mrs. Smith at one point was grabbing onto the president, and she realized that she was sobbing on the lapel of his suit, and she became self-conscious, and she looked up into his face in order to apologize, and she was just crestfallen to see that the president was in fact glassing the crowd, so to speak. He was looking around, almost perhaps like you would at a function or a cocktail party or something.
You couldn't look her in the eye.
That's exactly right, Doug. Quickly, she gave Hillary Clinton a hug, and I guess as she was speaking with Mrs. Clinton excused herself and drifted toward some of the media that were there. And lastly, Leon Panetta, and this is the one I really want to emphasize here this evening. Leon Panetta took Mrs. Smith's face in his hands. He looked her in the eye, and he said, "I will get to the bottom of this. I will find out what happened to Sean and why." And Mrs. Smith reiterated a number of times in telling this that not a single call to Mr. Panetta's office, his former office, has been returned. Not a single call. And lastly, I'll summarize this story by saying that at this point, Mrs. Smith was in tears, again on national radio, and she said, "Nobody will answer me. Nobody will answer my questions, and I've got to keep asking. I'm going to keep on asking. I can't stop. I have to know." She said, "I have to know," over and over again. And then she made Mr. Hannity aware of the fact that her son will be receiving posthumously the Jefferson Award. And she has not been invited to the proceedings, to the ceremony. Apparently, Sean Smith's wife has been. Mrs. Smith mentioned again, she was in tears that she wants to go, but she's subsisting on, she said, quote, "All I've got is my Social Security to get by." And I'll just end this by saying that, I'll just say God bless Sean Hannity. He concluded the interview by saying, he asked her to stay on the phone, and he said, "Mrs. Smith, I want to say God bless you. I want to honor your son and you and your loss. I will personally fly you and a friend to the Jefferson Award ceremony. We'll take care of accommodations, car driver, etc." So anyway, as I said, Doug and Joe, both of you, thank you for continuing to turn the spotlight on this Benghazi thing. Doug, there is a bad moon rising, and I wish we could slow it. But when I hear Gold Star moms like Patricia Smith, like Susan Price, and I hear how they're being treated and how they're being disregarded, I think of the military service that goes back 4 generations in my family, and it breaks my heart. And I guess that's it for me for tonight.
Well, I just want to say this, very articulate, and it's my understanding, as you pointed out, that had Patricia Smith, for example, had she presented a different air about her, where she would have provided the administration with a better photo op, she would have been provided the accommodations at government expense to the memorial for her son. In fact, knowing that would not be the case, she was disregarded, and hence Sean Hannity came in and did what he did. But it's sad when you've got decisions being made based on political, issues. It really is. It's sad, and we're gonna work to expose this even more, because the other side of the coin, as I mentioned during the first hour or second hour, perhaps, first hour is the drug running operation that's ongoing with Benghazi, with Libya, with Syria, with connected through all of this, and that's and you know what, that's a common theme with Susan's son, as well as others involved in Libya. So,
well, Doug, let me just make this final comment, and I'll let others join. Doug and Joe, perhaps you can touch on this in more detail later, but when did we become the bad guys? When did that happen? I mean, growing up as a kid, you saw the stars and stripes coming. You knew that you were going to be okay. And I'll just post this. I'll pose this as a rhetorical question, and I'll say goodnight. But gentlemen, when did we become the bad guys?
Oh. Wow.
No, I don't know if you're still there. I think he dropped off.
Yeah, I'm still.
Okay. You mean when did America or the people of America become the bad guys?
You know what, Joe? I appreciate you making that distinction, because you have been on point with what Mr. Augusto Perez emphasized over and over again last night, and maybe you could touch on that a little bit. We as believers have an onus placed. We have a challenge before us. We have a mission before us. And I just hope and pray that many join us on this. Many. I'm talking millions. And I will go ahead and make that my final comment, gentlemen.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. We appreciate your call. God bless you, and thanks for thanks for being a presence in the streets of Pasadena. It's always good to get the word out in Southern California. But he brings up a good point, and one that I think everyone listening to this broadcast should ponder and not dismiss out of hand. When did we become the bad guys? Remember, folks, when you saw... Well, wait a second, though. Think about this. Remember when I was a kid, if I saw a police officer, number one, I had a respect for that officer, and number two, I knew that if I was in trouble, I could go to that officer, and I felt a level of safety.
Right. And I was just talking to a friend about this 2 days ago.
Now you drive down the road and you see, and this happened to me today.
Yeah,
I was going down the road and I passed a cop, and I'm thinking,
Get
was I
nervous?
speeding? Yeah, was I speeding? Is my headlight out? Is this or that? What's going on?
The same things I was talking about my friend with. Since when, and I never grew up seeing cops and feeling safe, because when I was younger, anytime I saw the cops, they were usually coming to take
get
me
you.
away.
You
But,
had good reason to fear it. I'm just kidding.
But really though, you could be pulled over. I'm sure this goes to most people in America now. 100% sober, obviously not breaking any laws, seatbelt on, and you're scared because the authority that officer holds over you, or his perceived perception of the authority he holds over you, is not the same in most cases. And this does not go for all officers, obviously. There are many very brave and good police officers out there, but there are those other ones that are just completely out of control, and then this, like a good old boys network, too, where, it's against the rules to tell on other cops, even if you see them doing something wrong, breaking the law, mistreating a person. But yeah, I've never felt comfortable around the law enforcement officers, but we became the enemy. We became a bad nation when we started caring more about ourselves and our ways than the Lord's ways. Because at one time this nation wasn't like that. And it was very successful, prosperous, and everything you would want from a country.
Well, I look at, as I consider myself as a student of history all the time. I mean, I'm learning every day, and I look back at for example, the McCarthy hearings, and look at the infiltration of the communists into our government, and even right through the 1990s and the first decade of this century, where the archives were altered, the stories were altered, records were taken out of the National Archives to change the course of history. And you think, okay, and then of course, in addition to that, the sanitizing the records, you also have the removal of God. You've got the removal of morality. You've got the and the redefining of morals. And so all of this together, you see, I don't think, and I think you brought this up earlier, and it's a good point. We would not be in the position we're in right now if we would maintain our morality and our spirituality the same level that we had.
Well, that calls for personal responsibility and deprivation of self. So we can't have that.
Well, we have generations who are replaced now with things that it's instant gratification as opposed to delayed gratification. You can't wait to buy a house, so you borrow the money to buy a house instead of saving, as your forefathers had done, or a car even, or even that dress or that pair of pants that you saw. Have it today, charge it. You see where we're going with this? It's that instant gratification aspect of things. And that also leads into the morality and into the spirituality aspect of things as well. So it's all interconnected. And I think that we've got to look at this as a bigger problem, as a metastatic process, as opposed to just a static process.
Moving on the phones here, we're going to go to area code 443 next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hello, guys. How you doing?
Very well. What's up?
Can you
What's
hear
on
me?
your mind? We can, yes.
Well, I wanted to answer that question. Our country and us as a people have turned the bad guys since the enemy seed has started to choke God's good seed. There's more weeds and tares growing up around us with all the sin that our country, in God's perfect judgment, just has to come to wipe it clean. And at this point, there's no turning back from that. It's up to us, each individually, to spiritually prepare for it. And that's what you guys, I commend you for, and everyone else, Steve Quayle and Pastor Langford, is trying to call everyone to do. It's so late in the hour when people waste your time asking you, well, when do we look for this? When we're ready to splat, like you guys have said. And it's so imperative that people wake up.
Amen.
I'm calling you guys from... Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Doug.
No, I just want to say you're so right,
Joe,
and that lack of the purpose on earth, the drive to search for truth, is really been that lack is huge, and
it's so lacking. What everyone needs to understand is that no matter how small, no matter how little we think we can do, that's exactly who God wants and needs to use, and it's to His glory that He'll do it. He chose fishermen and tax collectors, and He Himself, Jesus, came as a carpenter. All simple people, lay folk, and that's who needs to rise up and be this remnant. Because everyone, it says that in the end, the first will be last, and the last will be first, and that's what's happening. And even the elect would be deceived if possible. These big mega churches have been doing good and spreading the word and winning souls, but they continue giving them milk, and they don't open their eyes and give them the meat that they need to see what's around them. They do.
There's a
operate
level of
spiritually, and then they know about the armor of God, but they're skipping the step that's right in front of them. The what's happening in the world. They're trying to jump past that and ignore it and think that it doesn't matter because we're going to skip out of here. And it, it's on my heart so much lately, and I finally think I know, what my purpose is supposed to be with, everything I've been listening to the past 2 years makes so much sense. You can't argue it. You can tell it's inspired by the Holy Spirit, and everyone's just, that you listen to is just screaming for people to wake up, and they still are just asslumber in their American dream. Like someone said the other night I was listening to, you have to fall asleep before you can live the American dream, and everyone's doing it. And it's time now, to wake up. But like I said, I'm calling from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and it's a small town, but everyone knows that it was a turning point in the Civil War when we were standing up for what was right. And a tiny little town like this is where everything turned in that major event that affected the whole world. People need to realize that can happen. Every little thing we do is we need to stand up for Jesus. And every time we do, that's what makes a difference. And that's how we do something about all this. But the time to do it now. It needs to happen.
Couldn't have said it better myself. No, I agree.
I wish I could talk with you guys for 3 hours one night, but it's just, I just want to stress it's just so imperative. And in my own area here, I want to meet with my local pastors this week and talk with them, and see what direction we should go. I want to try getting someone like Pastor David Langford. I know he might have a little more free time if he'd want to come and speak to our congregation up here, and so that people in the area, everyone can start getting on the same page and waking up and coming together and unifying that remnant, so we can do something about all this instead of just watching it happen,
Yeah.
Yep. Unity in the spirit, unity in of purpose, and unity in under one God.
Yeah, and if you do
Amen, brother. Amen.
If you do go talk to your pastor and pastors in your town, call us back next week and let us know what the response was. Because I've talked to pastors with about different issues. One being the NIV Bible, and
right.
No matter what the issue is, it seems as though they don't feel it's important, or they don't believe it, even though it's right in their face.
Yeah, there's a passive resistance that takes place.
Right. And I've been thinking that you can't stress so much a certain idea of doctrine, whether it is which scripture to use, which King James, of course, is the most purest we have, unless you can interpret, Greek or Hebrew yourself. And it's not to say the other ones can't win people to Christ, so, I can see both sides of that argument. When you start arguing doctrine, that does turn people cold. But the things that they can't ignore is what's happening in real time, the current events that we all discuss, and relating them to specific Bible scriptures and saying, look, guys, this is happening. And, this is, where it says in the Bible it's gonna, and you can't ignore it, whether you think we're going to have a secret preacher of whatever party, yeah. Whether you think that or not, you can't ignore what's happening right now. And, that's kind of the approach I want to take. I did have lunch with the pastor about 2 months ago and discussed some things, and he seems on, the same page. They do pretty good, at this church. So I'm hoping they're going to be receptive and at least, help me to get a platform or to do something, whether they give me the pulpit for a Sunday morning or not, we'll see. Or if they would let someone like Pastor Langford come up for a day, that would be great, because he could do it much better than I could, I'm sure, and it would give everyone at least a foundation, a starting point for what needs to happen in these, the last days only happen once, so people need to wake up and see that. It's just so hard to believe that they don't. They're so hypnotized, and then they don't even want to hear it because it's not pleasant. Of course, it's not. But
No, you're exactly right. And I commend you. You know, do whatever you can, whether it be the littlest task to, anything that you can do to help another person, to help your spiritual family, your church. I say is a positive thing as long as they're doing the right thing and on the right track, and you can't go wrong.
Yeah, you're doing something. You're not. You are actually physically
well, I'm
doing
about
something.
to. Me getting through to you guys is the first step of it. Actually, I've kind of been ignored. I've been Jonah not going to Nineveh, and me getting through to you guys tonight is another confirmation that this is maybe the 10th time I've tried, and you never answered. The fact that I actually did, it's another confirmation. I didn't go to church for 2 months. It's not even. I'm not even a member. It was my father's church who went for 20 years and just passed away last June, and it's been a really wild year, and a lot of things have happened, amazing things and signs, and I haven't been ignoring them. I've been in the Word. I just haven't stepped out. I wasn't sure exactly how to do it, but it's becoming pretty clear now. So,
Well, to take this,
I want to thank you guys so much for what you do. I mean, your show's been great. The guest you have on Steve's been great. For all the different guys, the Watchmen, and what they do. I mean, I pray for them and I thank God for them because, like I never even knew. Steve was saying the other night, his own family members. There's only a few of them that get it. I'm thinking if Steve was my dad or my uncle, I'd be sitting next to him listening all day long until my wife said, "You got to come home and do something," And it just blows my mind that even he goes through the same things, with all the knowledge God has given him about different things and how he explains it so well, and then yet his own family and close ones just don't get it. It's sad, and it does grieve my spirit, to see all these things happening. And, it's just whatever little we can do, it'll all add up. That's what God wants to do with us all, no matter how small.
There is no little task. There is no small task when doing the Lord's will. And
right on.
We need to know that we can make a difference from something we might think is nothing, insignificant. We do not know how that our interaction with other people, how that affects them later on. And caller, we're gonna cut you loose so we can get a couple more calls going here. But please call back and keep doing what you're doing and reach out and get as active as you can.
God bless you, my friend.
All right. Yep. I thank you. God bless you guys.
Thank you. Wow.
Yep.
See, Joe. Again, you just have to make that first step, make the first move, and
that is the hardest thing to do. And Brother Marcus sent me some literature on some different, and it had some little different small books in there, and one of them was called "If Not Now, When." And they was talking about the procrastination people have in repenting and getting themselves right, being refined into what they're supposed to be. And it really speaks to how if you put it off once,
and that goes to
twice, you might never go, and you might never get to it.
It does speak to everything as well. What that caller did say, and it didn't say specifically, but look, we can postpone making that phone call or talking with our brother or family member. We can postpone putting some cash aside for the day that the banks are, not going to have the cash for us, or whatever. And that's why I'm big on preparation, because if not today, are we sure that we are going to be able to prepare tomorrow? Is that storm that we see on the horizon, that dust cloud, is that perhaps that's closer than we think?
If you are sure that you have tomorrow, I would say that you pray and ask for some guidance, because that's not a good place to be. The Lord says He will take those quickly in some cases. Anyway, we're going to go back to the phones here. We're going to get one more call in before the end of the show, and we are going to go to 303. Donna, I see you were on hold, and call back tomorrow. We will take you first. 303, you're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. What is on your mind tonight?
For I am not ashamed of the gospel of the Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation for those who believe. Bless all the listeners in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach.
Amen. Anything else?
Well, we just keep our focus out there. Like Doug just said, do something every day and every week to prepare. Those that don't have the money to prepare, believe it or not, you can get into food banks in your area, and they got some staples that you can put to the side and you qualify for, especially if you're on a limited income. You really just have to exhaust all resources at your disposal and never lose faith, because God's in charge.
You're right, and you make an important point. The faith aspect of this, the people that don't have anything, faith is always the cornerstone. It is the most important thing. But if you keep that faith in the hardest of times, that's when the Lord, He will bless you. We are, people always look at tribulation and strifes as a bad thing, and they are bad, but they also serve another purpose, and that is to help change us. It's lessons to us. We learn through tribulation and trials.
It definitely humbles us before God. That there's so many ways that we could take this, so many directions, I should say, that we could take this, but we're certainly humbled before God when we do endure challenges. But it's incumbent upon us, I believe, to handle those in a godly way and to make it to the other side, whether it be the big issues, the big tribulations in our lives, or the smaller ones. But whatever they are, we've got to handle them, put on our big boy pants or big girl pants, and hit them head on with the proper mental and spiritual attitude and altitude as well. So you've said a lot, and your scripture, your spiritual your spiritual intonation is just fantastic. We really appreciate that, and you add a lot of dimensionality to our program. God bless you for that, my friend.
God bless you both. Listening around the different freedom movement type of radio broadcasts, I've really come to find a home in listening to the Hagmans. We find our news in lots of different venues, whether it's mainstream media, which we all know is more entertainment than anything else, or those who are willing to profess the name of Jesus and talk about how that applies to what we're seeing in the world. There is a lot of bogus misinformation out there, even along the truth movement, and I really commend and bless what you guys are doing, and never take the road least traveled, because I've made my rounds, and with discernment, I've even turned away from the tip of the spear, if you know what I mean, because of some very questionable things. But I think you guys are redefining yourself as the tip of the spear, and you're always going to have my listenership as long as you keep professing the name of Jesus, our Savior, our Lord.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot to us. And caller, and this goes for every listener and every caller, everyone within the sound of our voices, we will always do what we're led by God to do. We will not let you down, at least not intentionally. We will always search for the truth. We will always attempt to do so in a humble fashion, in a very in a knowing that look, we're just mortal men following what we believe is our calling. And
yes,
that's
and
it.
as we know, all the glory goes to the Lord.
90
we know
seconds.
we are doing this not because it was our set out goal. It was obviously for a higher purpose, and we have to stay true to that. And all of us have the ability to make God happy, to do God's will. It's just a matter of us accepting it and letting go of ourselves.
Absolutely.
60
Sir,
seconds.
you've reached, you've closed out our program. I want to say thank you so much for your call. I want to wish you a very good night until we talk again. Ladies and gentlemen, you have now completed 3 hours of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. You can feel free to put your seat backs and tray tables in their full upright and locked position and prepare for landing yet another day. Put your notebooks and pens away until tomorrow. I want to say tomorrow's show, by the way, we haven't really spoken too much about this, but we want to get into some economic aspects of what's going on because we think it's a very important part of things. At least that'll be part of the show. Until tomorrow, I want to say God bless you and take a step tomorrow for preparation for what's to come.
Have a great night, everyone. Stay safe. We'll
10
see you tomorrow.
seconds.
And we might have a guest. Have a good night.